Chapter 196. Like I said, Junwei is treating me like an outsider. Han Mingxi sighed helplessly. Yi Li smiled faintly and lowered her head without saying a word. She wondered if she needed Princess Anxi's help. In the sparkling light of the pearls, the heavy stone door was opened. The woman in the golden dress was no longer as leisurely as she used to be. Her messy footsteps seemed to contain great anger. Shu Qingchen, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked back at the woman who came in a hurry. He frowned and said, "What's wrong?" The woman seemed to be furious. She swept all the celadon teacups on the table to the ground with a wave of her sleeve. The sound of the teacups breaking was crisp and pleasant. "Speak. How did they know you were here?" Shu Qingchen shook his head and said faintly, "I can't even get out of the door. How could I know this? What's wrong? Did someone make trouble for you? How could you not know? You must have spread the news. Tell me, what did you do?" The woman tried to control her anger and asked. Shu Qingchen shook his head and sighed. "You think too highly of me. I'm just a weak and helpless scholar, not a hidden expert. If you have time to think about this, why don't you think about who you have offended recently?" The woman snorted and said, "How could I offend anyone? Besides Anxi, the only person I have offended in my life. Haha, it seems to be your delicate fiancée. I told you not to touch her," Shu Qingchen said in a low voice. The woman sneered, "Don't worry. Your precious fiancée is fine. But it doesn't mean she will be fine in the future. Last time, I just wanted to scare her. Speaking of which, it seems that her bodyguards are good." Shu Qingchen didn't care. "Are you talking about her bodyguards? The daughters of the Central Plains always have a few bodyguards when they go out. It's not a big deal. You trust her. Why don't we continue to see if her bodyguards can protect her? Who knows, maybe they'll fall in love with each other. Don't girls love to play the hero and save the beauty?" Shu Qingchen glanced at her. "If you have the time, why don't you tell me what happened to make you so angry?" At the mention of this matter, the woman's face, hidden under the mask, could not help but twist. She said with hatred, "Someone threw the bodies of those assassins outside the Saint Lady Temple." Shu Qingchen was a little surprised, but she soon relaxed her brows. "Even so, it's not a big deal. Just leave it to the Nanjiao royal family or the authorities to deal with it." "How can this be?" The woman cried out, "Don't tell me you don't know. If someone knows that a body has been dumped in the temple of the Saint Lady, Anxi will definitely take the opportunity to search the temple of the Saint Lady. Humph. Don't think that I don't know that she has long wanted to reach into the Saint Lady's hall. But she's not qualified." Shu Qingchen reached for a book and opened it. She said, "You haven't told me yet. If people know that the corpse was found in the Saint Lady's temple, the people of Nanjiao will doubt the sanctity of the Saint Lady of Nanjiang. Most importantly, if you had another year or two, you could have pushed this matter to the Da Chu state or West Hill. But now, you're not even ready to go to war with the Da Chu state." The woman's eyes darkened. She stared at him gloomily and said in a low voice, "You know too much. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Shu Qingchen nodded slightly. "Because you want to know more from me, don't you?" "That's right," the woman admitted directly. "If you hadn't secretly helped Anxi, she wouldn't have been able to defeat me. Since you can help her, you can help me, can't you?" Shu Qingchen shook his head. "I won't help you. I'll make sure you're willing." The woman sneered. Shu Qingchen put down the book again and looked at her with pity. "You're not suitable for this at all. None of the previous saints of Nanjiang are suitable. Even if you're smarter than them, you're still not as good as Princess Anxi when it comes to governing a country." A trace of anger flashed in the woman's eyes. She said coldly, "Who says I'm not suitable? You admit that I'm smarter than Anxi, don't you? You're just better at scheming than her. But a country can't be governed by scheming. What's more, you can't even do scheming. So what? At least you're in my hands now, aren't you?" The woman said proudly. Shu Qingchen smiled and said nothing. Looking at Shu Qingchen's calm face, the woman suddenly felt very angry. She said with hatred, "You're looking down on me." Shu Qingchen frowned. "I'm not looking down on you. I just don't agree with what you're doing now. I know. You're looking down on me. The woman screamed. What do you know? Do you know what kind of life Archie has lived since she was a child? What kind of life I've lived since I was a child? Why? Why is she born as the crown princess and the crown princess? Why does everything belong to her? You're the saint of Nanjiang. You're also respected by tens of thousands of people, Shu Qingchen said. Ha ha, respected by tens of thousands of people? I haven't seen my mother since I was 3 years old. I've been alone since I was 5 years old. He was not allowed to talk to the maids, not allowed to go out to play, not allowed to cry, not allowed to see outsiders, and not even allowed to be tempted. When I'm 28, I still have to go to that damn holy land. Who wants to go to that damn place? Nanjiao is mine. Everything is mine. The woman screamed as if she had suddenly broken down. Shu Qingchen shook his head. The life of the saint of Nanjiang is indeed very pitiful. But I don't think that includes you. No one has ever restricted your actions, right? Otherwise, how could you have the chance to meet King Li and become enemies with Princess Anshi? Even, the new saint of Nanjiang had already appeared 2 years ago. You just killed her. The saint of Nanjiang can be 28 years old at the latest. But in fact, most saint of Nanjiang abdicate before 25. Anshi even told you this? The woman stared at him. It seems that she really trusts you. I'm friends with Princess Anshi. The breakdown just now seemed to be an illusion. Or it could be called acting. The woman regained her elegance in a moment. Good friend. I'll send the heads of your friends and your fiancé to you. With that, the woman flicked her sleeves and left. Shu Qingchen frowned as he watched the stone door close again. The saint of Nanjiang was gradually losing her mind. As long as everything went according to the plan he and Princess Anshi had discussed in the past 6 months, they would definitely be able to take down the saint of Nanjiang and King Li's forces in Nanjiang without shedding a drop of blood. So now was the time to think about how to escape. Since he had achieved his goal beyond his expectations, there was no point in staying here any longer. And the later it would be, the more dangerous it would be. The stone door was pushed open from the outside again. Shu Qingchen said indifferently, Miss, is there anything else? Miss, it's nothing. Brother Qingchen, it's me. There was a crisp laughter at the door. Shu Qingchen was startled and quickly turned to look at the door. Beside the half-opened stone door, a pretty girl in a light yellow dress was looking at him with a smile. Li Yi Li stepped forward and looked around the stone room with a smile. Big brother, it seems that you're doing well here. Shu Qingchen looked at her with a smile and said, Li why are you here? Yi Li winked at him and pointed at the half-open stone door. She smiled and said, Come and welcome Master Qingchen. Chapter 197. Shu Qingchen looked at the door thoughtfully. There's someone else outside. Yi Li pulled Shu Qingchen and smiled. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's go. It won't be good if that woman comes back. Shu Qingchen nodded. Li is right. Let's talk about it outside. For example, I suddenly have a fiancé. The smile on Yi Li's face froze. After a while, she laughed and said, Brother Qingchen, remember to call me Chu Liuyun when you go out. It's easy to be suspicious if you don't even know your fiancé's name. Shu Qingchen tidied up a little and took a few things from the table. He then followed Yi Li out of the stone door. Outside the door, an was waiting with 2 unfamiliar shadow guards. When they saw Yi Li and Shu Qingchen come out, they heaved a sigh of relief and said, Young Master Qingchen is indeed here. Miss, let's go out of the palace. How's that woman? An said, Princess Anshi brought people to the Saints' Hall according to our information. With those corpses, that woman will definitely have her eyes on her because of Princess Anshi. They must be waiting for you at the Saint Ladies' Hall. Yi Li nodded in satisfaction. What about the palace? An said, Young Master Han will create chaos in the palace, and we can take the opportunity to leave. Yi Li nodded. I hope Han Mingxi is reliable this time. An lowered his head and laughed. Young Master Han asked An San to pass the message. I guarantee that he won't disappoint you. I hope so. The two shadow guards protected Shu Qingchen while an and Yi Li stood in front and behind. Sure enough, as they had expected, a long tunnel connected the Imperial Palace and the Sacred Maiden Hall. Although the mountain behind the Imperial Palace was not completely hollowed out like the Luori tribe, there were still a few stone rooms connected to the tunnel. Shu Qingchen was under house arrest in one of them. With Yi Li and the others leading the way, the group naturally quickly arrived at the exit of the Imperial Palace. Shu Qingchen frowned and asked, "Where is the exit?" An said with some regret, "It's in the Nanjiao King's bedroom. That saintess of the southern wilderness is so crazy, yet Nanjiao King still dares to build a secret passage in his bedroom. Isn't he afraid of being killed by the saintess of the southern wilderness?" Shu Qingchen wasn't surprised and said faintly, "Under normal circumstances, Southern Border's Holy Maiden will be absolutely loyal to Nanjiao King." An was puzzled, "Then what's going on now?" Yi Li interrupted, "Let's talk about it when we get back." An hurriedly complied and walked forward to carefully push open the mechanism of the secret passage. The heavy boulder was moved away, and an empty palace appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the group of 5 walked out, an then sealed the mechanism of the secret passage again. The 2 secret guards were the first to dash out, just in time to pull in the 2 guards at the door who had come to investigate after hearing the commotion. The 2 guards didn't even have time to groan before they quietly fell to the ground. Shu Qingchen glanced at Yi Li, who had a calm expression, and his eyes moved slightly. He reached out and pulled Yi Li to his side. Yi Li raised her head and smiled faintly at him. "Big brother, let's go out quickly." Shu Qingchen nodded. Coming out of Nanjiao King's gorgeous bedroom, they didn't encounter too many guards along the way. A few guards were also taken care of by the 2 shadow guards and an Because the route had been planned in advance, it didn't take much effort for the group to get out of the palace and stand at the secret place that Han Mingxi had prepared for them in advance. "Zhun Wei, this young master is back. Why haven't you come out to greet me?" The group didn't have time to sit down to drink water and catch their breath. Han Mingxi's incomparably coquettish voice sounded outside the courtyard. Just as he turned around, a shadow fell from the top of the wall and pounced in the direction of Yi Li. Young Master Han, and San, who was following behind him, broke out in cold sweat and hurriedly called out. Shu Qingchen and an beside Yi Li also stepped forward to block Han Mingxi's figure. Shu Qingchen's smile was warm and cold. "Young Master Han, what are you doing?" Only then did Han Mingxi see clearly that the person standing beside Shu Qingchen wasn't his beloved younger brother Zhun Wei, but a delicate young girl wearing a light yellow robe. This. Yi Li hurriedly retreated behind Shu Qingchen, only sticking out half of her face. "Big brother Qingchen," Han Mingxi saw that the young girl seemed to have been frightened by him and couldn't help but feel ashamed. He, young Master Feng Yu, had dominated the Sea of Flowers for more than a decade. When had he ever done such a disrespectful thing to a beautiful young girl? In order to maintain his image at the banquet, Han Mingxi immediately put on young Master Feng Yu's signature smile and raised an eyebrow behind Shu Qingchen. In a gentle voice, he said, "Miss, I'm really sorry. This one is Han Mingxi. Did I scare you just now?" This humble one apologizes for his mistake. Yi Li hid behind Shu Qingchen and said crisply, "No need. But young master, please don't do this in the future. After all, there are differences between men and women." Han Mingxi's mouth twitched. He really wasn't a lecher. He just thought that the person standing beside Shu Qingchen was Zhun Wei, okay? But then again, where did his younger brother Zhun Wei go? Jing, where did my younger brother Zhun Wei go? You're all here. Why is he missing? Yi Li couldn't help but look up at the sky. Who's your younger brother? An face darkened. He silently looked at Han Mingxi's unforgiving expression and said, "Young master didn't say that he would come here." Han Mingxi was dissatisfied. "Why didn't Zhun Wei come here?" An said, "This is the place that young master asked young master Han to prepare for young master Shu." Han Mingxi glanced at the elegant young master Qingchen unhappily. He didn't know why he felt a little sour in his heart. He said sadly, "But I prepared it for Zhun Wei." An couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Our young master has a place to live." Han Mingxi curled his lips and said, How can the place you live be more comfortable than the place I prepared? If I knew that Jun Wei didn't want to live here, I wouldn't have bothered so much. After saying that, he didn't forget to glare at Shu Qingchen. Shu Qingchen saw this and smiled faintly. Thank you for your trouble, young Master Han. Han Mingxi snorted and waved the folding fan in his hand. Seeing that you are Jun Wei's elder brother, this young master won't argue with you. Where is Jun Wei? Since he isn't with us or you, where is he now? An quickly glanced at Yi Li and said, when we came back, young Master Chu received a message and left first. He said that he had something to deal with first. He will come back later and we will meet. I see. Han Mingxi was skeptical. Perhaps it was because Er's slightly serious face was very trustworthy, but in the end, Han Mingxi snorted and left. Seeing Han Mingxi disappear in the yard, Shu Qingchen turned around and smiled at Yi Li. Little sister, it seems that many things have happened on your way to Nanjiang. Yi Li smiled at Shu Qingchen to please him. With Shu Qingchen's intelligence, it wasn't difficult for him to guess that Chu Junwei and Chu Liuyun were the same person. Shu Qingchen smiled at Yi Li's uneasy look and nodded. It just so happens that you and Big Brother haven't seen each other for almost a year. Let's go in and have a chat. Yi Li helplessly blinked and moved aside. She softly said, Big Brother, please. Chapter 198. In the study, Shu Qingchen sat behind the desk and calmly looked at the guilty-looking Yi Li. Yi Li stood at the side with her head lowered. Her eyes darted around, and she would secretly look up at Shu Qingchen from time to time. Just like how the previous generation of the Shu family was most afraid of Shu Hongyu, the current generation of the Shu family was most afraid of Shu Qingchen. This included Yi Li, who was often in the Shu family when she was young. Big Brother. Seeing that Shu Qingchen was just calmly staring at her without saying anything, Yi Li softly called out in grievance. Shu Qingchen looked at her pitiful appearance and sighed. I haven't seen you for a long time. Li, you've grown up. You actually know how to act pitiful in front of Big Brother. Yi Li blinked and pouted. Big Brother. I'm not acting pitiful. Why are you angry? Shu Qingchen raised his brows and said, Li, I don't know why Big Brother is angry. Yi Li shook her head. Shu Qingchen asked, Who is Chu Junwei? Who is Chu Liuyun? It was a waste of energy to beat around the bush with Big Brother. Yi Li lowered her head in defeat. Big Brother. Shu Qingchen pointed at the chair in front of him and said, Sit down. Sit down and tell me slowly. Yi Li sat down obediently on the chair. Then, she recounted everything in detail, from being schemed against by Yi Yu in the capital to finding Shu Qingchen in Nanjiang. When Yi Li finished, she realized that her mouth was dry. She looked up and saw Shu Qingchen handing her a cup of tea. Yi Li smiled slightly and hurriedly took a sip. After she drank the tea to moisten her throat, Shu Qingchen looked at her and said lightly, I won't tell you about being schemed against by Yi Yu first. Why did you specially go to Guangling to find Han Mingxi? You even brought him to Nanjiang. Yi Li softly said, I didn't want to alarm the people in the capital, so it wasn't convenient for me to use King Ding's shadow guard. Han Mingxi came here of his own accord, I didn't bring him here. Shu Qingchen looked at her with a faint smile and said, It's a good idea not to alarm the people in the capital. However, have you asked about the relationship between Han Mingyu and Prince Ding? What if outsiders find out that you, the future imperial consort, went to the Qianni Pavilion under an assumed name? Most importantly, if Han Mingyu really wanted to investigate, would he not be able to find out your identity? What will you do if he makes things difficult for you? Yi Li looked up at Shu Qingchen's still smiling handsome face. I left Dark 4 to monitor the Wind and Moon Pavilion. If Han Mingyu comes back, he will inform me immediately. Moreover, I didn't ask the Qianni Pavilion to do what was really important to me. I just want the Qianni Pavilion to distract the Shadow Guard. Shu Qingchen nodded and said, You've crossed the line. Then, who told you to provoke Sickly Scholar? Big Brother, you also know Sickly Scholar? Yi Li asked. Although Sickly Scholar was famous, he was a member of the Jianghu. Yi Li was curious that Shu Qingchen knew this person. Shu Qingchen looked at her indifferently. Ling Taihan, the first master of the Yangwang Chamber of Commerce, is my friend. Yi Li was speechless. She looked up at the sky silently in her heart. She was just thinking about how to scheme against Sickly Scholar, but Sickly Scholar was still a dangerous existence. Big brother, if I do something to Sickly Scholar, it won't affect your friendship with Pavilion Masterling, right? Shu Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, "What do you want to do to him?" Yi Li frowned and told him about the Biluo flower in detail. After listening to her, Shu Qingchen was silent for a moment before saying, "So, you're worried that he will harm Prince Ding if he gets the Biluo flower, so you want to get rid of this hidden danger first. At the same time, you think that the Biluo flower may be helpful to Prince Ding's illness, so you want to get the Biluo flower too? You're really considerate of Mo Xiaoyao. It's obvious that you really think of yourself as the future princess consort. Father and uncle have always been worried that you're too calm, but I'm sure they don't want to see you place too much importance on Prince Ding." Hearing Shu Qingchen say this, Yi Li suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. "Big brother, what are you saying? Mo Xiaoyao has always been good to me. Since I'm already married to him, I naturally want him to be well. Could it be that big brother wants him to die quickly and your poor cousin to become a widow?" Seeing Yi Li's forceful and confident appearance, Shu Qingchen smiled. He coughed lightly and said, "Forget it. You should be careful about Sickly Scholar. As for Ling Taihan, I'll talk to him. I won't let the Yangwang Chamber of Commerce make trouble for you." "Thank you, big brother." Yi Li smiled. Shu Qingchen looked at her with a half smile and said, "No need to thank me, cousin Li. Let's talk about my fiancé now." "That's right, I've already sent a pigeon back to the capital to inform the people who should be informed." "Ah, cousin. How can you be like this? No, how can you be so fast?" Yi Li felt a headache when she thought about how many letters she would receive because of this matter and how she would be lectured by her eldest and second uncles in the future. Shu Qingchen smiled and said, "Actually, when I heard that my fiancé was coming to Nanjiao, I had someone send a letter back. Or do you think that big brother won't be able to send a letter outside because he's under house arrest? There should be a reply in at most 5 days. Liu Yun Mai Mai." Yi Li couldn't help but want to hold her head and groan. Big brother was really too bad. Capital. Prince, a secret letter from Yunju. In the study, Chief Steward Mo quickly walked in with a letter sealed with a black flame. Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting in the study reading, suddenly raised his head. He took the letter from Chief Steward Mo's hands and quickly read it. His expression gradually became serious. The air pressure in the study seemed to freeze. Chief Steward Mo asked worriedly, "Prince?" Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and paused slightly. The letter in his hand had been unconsciously crumpled into a ball. Closing his eyes slightly to calm the shock and anger in his heart, Mo Xiaoyao refolded the ball of paper in his hand and said in a heavy voice, "Tell Feng Jiao to come over, and ask Sir Shen to come over as well. Prepare, I will enter the palace in a moment." Chief Steward Mo frowned. Ever since the Wang Fei's incident, the prince had not entered the palace. It seemed that the news from Yunju was something major. Even though he was worried, Chief Steward Mo could only respond in a low voice to the prince's orders, "This subordinate will go now." A short while later, Feng Jiao and Shen Yang appeared at the door of the study. Feng Jiao raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, "What orders does Prince have?" Mo Xiaoyao reached out and handed over the slightly crumpled letter. He said in a heavy voice, "Take a look." Feng Jiao's handsome brows rose slightly. He understood Mo Xiaoyao and naturally understood the meaning of his expression and tone. He did not speak further and took the letter to sit down on the side. "From Yunju? Is this old Mr. Qingyun's handwriting?" Mo Xiaoyao nodded silently. Feng Jiao's expression also became slightly serious. He had originally hoped that the Shu family would have someone knowledgeable to help translate what Yi Li had sent back. He hadn't thought that it would alarm Mr. Qingyun. Anything that could attract the attention of this old mister was not a small matter. Feng Jiao sat on the side and read the letter. Shen Yang looked strangely at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, "Prince, is something the matter? Or are you not feeling well?" Shen Yang was a doctor and did not like to ask about these things. Chapter 199. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, originally, Mr. Shen was supposed to depart for Xiling in a few days, but now I'm afraid I'll have to ask Mr. Shen to postpone it. Shen Yang frowned and said, Prince's plan has changed. Mo Xiaoyao sighed and said, it's too late. Mr. Shen, I need to make a trip to Nanjiang. What? Shen Yang said loudly. Even Feng Zhiyao, who was sitting at the side, could not help but be stunned and frown worriedly. Shen Yang did not give Mo Xiaoyao a chance to speak at all. He angrily shouted at Mo Xiaoyao, Prince, are you joking? Your body is much better than last winter, but don't forget that this is only in comparison to last winter. Nanjiang's climate is wet and rainy, it's not suitable for your body at all. And, you know it yourself, the cold poison in your body has already gone out of control last winter. Although you tried to suppress it, your body will only get worse and worse. If you change places rashly, the cold poison may even go out of control again. Feng Zhiyao was somewhat puzzled. The warm climate in Nanjiang, isn't it more suitable for Prince's body? Shen Yang rolled his eyes in annoyance. If that's the case, why did we go through so much trouble for so many years? Wouldn't it be better to just let Prince go to Nanjiang to recuperate? Mr. Shen, Mo Xiaoyao frowned and looked at Shen Yang seriously and said in a low voice, I must go. The low and firm voice announced the speaker's unwavering will. Reason. Shen Yang said angrily, Prince, please give me a reason why you don't care about your own life. As a doctor, I at least have the right to know why my patients are sending themselves to their deaths. Mo Xiaoyao sighed. He was full of respect for this elder who had pulled him back from the road to the netherworld again and again. Unfortunately, he had to go against his wishes, because, if I don't go, we can only atone for our sins with our deaths in the future. Shen Yang was shocked. For Mo Xiaoyao to say such words, the matter was not something he could stop, or he could not stop it at all. Shen Yang seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant and said sadly, Prince, even if you go to Nanjiang, with your current body, there is nothing you can do. The body that was affected by the cold poison was extremely sensitive to changes in the weather. The north was dry, even if it was not rainy, Mo Xiaoyao's body would be extremely weak and ache, not to mention the rainy south. Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have it any better in the past than in the winter. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes. I know you have a way. Mr. Shen, I can't go to Jiang to go to Nanjiang like this. I want to stand up and appear in southern border in one piece. Do you understand? To Nanjiang. Feng Zhiyao also suddenly stood up and said, Prince, things have not reached that stage yet. Why don't we go to Nanjiang first, and then, we can talk about it when the time comes? Mo Xiaoyao looked at him calmly and said, you should know that if I can't go to Nanjiang, it will be too late when things really reach that stage. Feng Zhiyao lowered his head and gripped the letter in his hand, speechless. Shen Yang snorted and said, I don't care what stage things have reached, there is no way. I am a doctor, not an assassin, I will not let you do that. Mo Xiaoyao ignored him and said lightly to Feng Zhiyao, go and prepare, I will go to the palace. Feng Zhiyao looked at him and did not know what to say for a long time. After a long time, he could only say in a low voice, yes, Prince. Mo Xiaoyao turned his hand and the wheelchair moved out of the door. When he passed by Shen Yang, he said lightly, Mr. Shen, I want to see the medicine when I come back. I won't give it to you. Shen Yang finally abandoned the gentleness of a doctor and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, the person he was shouting at had already gone out. Feng Zhiyao looked at Shen Yang, who was so angry that his face was red, and followed him out with the letter in his hand. Shen Yang was so angry that he could only stare blankly in the study. After a long time, he shouted, are the men of the Mo family sick? Can't this world live without you? Feng Zhiyao looked back at the study and quickly caught up with Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao asked indifferently, what do you want to say? Feng Zhiyao was stunned for a moment, and could only shake his head and say, I have nothing to say. Prince, please allow Feng San to do as he pleases. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, you need to stay and deal with the matters in the capital. Feng Zhiyao raised his eyebrows, and there was a heroic spirit between his brows that he didn't usually have. Prince, Feng San is a soldier. His life's ambition is to move unhindered on the battlefield, not to control the shadow guard and gather intelligence. Mo Xiaoyao was stunned, and he turned back to look at Feng Zhiao. Too much time had passed, and he had somewhat forgotten. When they were still naughty children, the red-clothed Feng Zhiao stood in front of him and said that in the future, he would become a peerless general who would win every battle. Then, Feng Zhiao gave up the Feng family's luxurious life at the age of 13, and followed him through life and death. Perhaps if it were not for that matter back then, Feng Zhiao would have already become a famous general of his generation as he wished, and would not have been forced to stay in the capital like he was now, using the image of a dissolute and unruly young master to appear in front of the world, just to conceal his identity as the commander of the hidden guards. After a long time, Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, "All right, if they really, then they should know about your relationship with the Ding Palace. I will make other arrangements for the Shadow Guard." At that time, Feng Zhiao had anonymously followed him on the battlefield. Not many people knew about it, but it wasn't that there weren't any. Feng Zhiao was overjoyed. "Thank you, Prince." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and replied, "I should be the one thanking you. Also, send someone to send a letter to Li on a fast horse. Be careful of Shu Manlin." Nanzhao capital Yi Li helplessly looked at the hostile Han Mingxi and the indifferent Shu Qingchen in front of her. "Young Master Han." Han Mingxi snorted and turned his face to Yi Li with a smile. "Liu Yun Mai, there's no need to be so polite. Since you also know Jun Wei, you can just call me Brother Mingxi." Yi Li looked at him speechlessly and swallowed back the words she wanted to say. Han Mingxi saw that the little beauty was ignoring him and shrugged his shoulders regretfully. He looked at Yi Li and said, "Speaking of which, Liu Yun Mai and Jun Wei are really similar. Actually, Jun Wei isn't young Master Qingchen's younger brother, but Liu Yun Mei's brother, right? Aren't both of you surnamed Chu?" Yi Li silently wiped her sweat in her heart. Brother Qingchen is really Jun Wei's elder brother. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes and blinked innocently at Yi Li. "Then Jun Wei's name is definitely not real? Liu Yun Mai, can you tell Big Brother? What is Jun Wei's name?" Yi Li's heart was filled with bitterness. She secretly regretted asking Han Mingxi for help in the first place. She looked pleadingly at Shu Qingchen, who was leisurely drinking tea. Shu Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, "Shu Qingliu." "Qingliu? Good name. It's very compatible with Jun Wei. Unlike some people. It's a waste of a good name." "No. Shu Qingliu is not one of the 5 young masters of the Shu family," Han Mingxi murmured. He quickly reacted and glared fiercely at Shu Qingchen. Shu Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, "Who told you that he's one of the 5 sons of the Shu family?" Han Mingxi lowered his head and thought. He didn't think so. After thinking for a moment, he raised his head and looked at Shu Qingchen with a strange and conflicted expression. If you looked carefully, you could see a little bit of contempt. Yi Li looked at Han Mingxi helplessly. "What are you thinking of now?" Chapter 200. Han Mingxi snorted and looked at Shu Qingchen from head to toe. He nodded and said, "This young master understands. No wonder I've never heard of Shu Qingliu's name. No wonder he has to change his name when he goes out. Temph, don't even think about bullying Qingliu in the future. No, with this name, he will definitely see it. Your Shu family can't bully Junwei in the future. He's under this young master's protection." Yi Li looked embarrassed. Shu Qingchen raised his eyebrows. "Young Master Han's imagination is quite good." Han Mingxi snorted, "This young master's ability to beat people is even better. If it weren't for Junwei's sake, this young master wouldn't beat you up." "Young Master Han," Yi Li called out helplessly. She was very moved by Han Mingxi's sincerity towards Chu Junwei. Thinking about how she hid it from him, she felt even more guilty. Han Mingxi glanced at her and said, "Little sister Liu Yun, you should change your fiancé as soon as possible. Some people look like elegant gentlemen on the outside, but who knows what kind of things they are on the inside." Temph, Junwei hasn't come back for so long and he doesn't seem to be worried. I'll go look for him. After saying that, Han Mingxi went out like a gust of wind. Shu Qingchen put down his teacup and said thoughtfully, "Han Mingxi is really good to you." Yi Li smiled bitterly. "I really regret lying to him now." Shu Qingchen said lightly, "It's right to be cautious when you go out. If you explain it to him earlier, he should understand. Yi Li looked at him helplessly. Then Big Brother just said something about Shu Qingliu. Wouldn't I be lying to him again if I tell him later? Shu Qingchen smiled indifferently and said, when I go back, I'll ask grandfather to record my name in the family tree. Then it won't be considered lying to him. But you. Yi Li looked at Shu Qingchen in confusion. Shu Qingchen shook his head and didn't say anything. Shu Qingchen. A delicate roar came from outside the door, and the door was kicked open from the outside with a bang. A sapphire blue figure rushed in. Yi Li couldn't help but tremble when she saw the aggressive woman. She turned around to look at Shu Qingchen, but she saw that Shu Qingchen was still sitting calmly and leisurely, as if the angry woman wasn't here for him. When the woman reached the entrance of the hall, she couldn't stop and stared at Shu Qingchen in a daze. Yi Li blinked her eyes, coughed lightly and called out, "Princess Jejia." Princess Anchi seemed to come to her senses. She stepped into the hall and asked with concern, "Qingchen, are you all right?" Shu Qingchen smiled faintly and said, looking at Princess's posture just now, "I thought that Princess was here to settle accounts with me." Princess Anchi's face turned red. She glared at him and said, "Shouldn't I be the one getting even with you? What have you done in the palace?" Shu Qingchen smiled innocently and said, "I didn't do anything." He didn't do anything. Everything was done by the Shadow Guard and the Tiani Pavilion. Princess Anchi walked to the side and sat down. She glared at Shu Qingchen and said with dissatisfaction, "You didn't do anything, but you made a mess in the palace. Father just summoned me to the palace to question me. He suspects that I did it." She was prepared to do that, but didn't someone else beat her to it? Why did father still suspect her? Shu Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, "You know that the king of Nanjiao suspects you. Why did you still come here?" Princess Anchi raised her eyebrows disdainfully and said, "Those good-for-nothings can only keep up with me if I want them to. I don't want them to be unable to keep up with me even if they break their legs." "Princess, why are you in such a hurry to come here?" Shu Qingchen asked. Yi Li watched from the side and sighed in her heart. Princess Anchi came here in such a hurry because she was worried about her brother's safety. But he just asked her indifferently, "Why are you here?" Did he expect the girl to say that she was worried about his safety? Princess Anchi was stunned. She glanced at Yi Li and raised her eyebrows, saying, "Can't I come here for no reason? This princess has to come and see if my friend and military advisor is still alive." Shu Qingchen shook his head and said, "I also have something to talk to you about. Since you're here, I don't need to send people to the princess mansion to look for you." Princess Anchi frowned and looked at Shu Qingchen, saying, "You're not going back to the princess mansion?" She hesitated and glanced at Yi Li, saying, "Miss Chu is living in my mansion now. You can take care of her if you go back with her. Isn't it convenient for us to discuss anything?" Yi Li thought for a while and said before Shu Qingchen spoke, "Princess, I'm really sorry that I lied to you before." Princess Anchi frowned in confusion. Yi Li said in a low voice, "That. I actually, Liu Yun is not a weak woman who can't even truss a chicken. Today, she and Lin Han entered the palace to save me. I was afraid that you would be suspicious, so I pretended that I didn't know anything." Shu Qingchen said indifferently. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and glared at Shu Qingchen. Shu Qingchen was as still as a mountain. Princess Anchi looked at him strangely. She looked at Yi Li and smiled, saying, "That's nothing. It's rare to see a girl from the Central Plains who is good at both the pen and the sword like Miss Chu. Miss Chu did it for Qingchen's safety. I'm not such a petty person." Yi Li said with a smile, "Thank you, Princess." The three of them moved to the study. Although Princess Anchi had some doubts about Yi Li's existence, she trusted Shu Qingchen and didn't ask any more questions. After all, the delicate girl in front of her had brought someone all the way to Nanjiao and successfully tricked her into saving Shu Qingchen. Naturally, she wasn't an ordinary person. Princess Anchi looked at Yi Li with a complicated gaze. Yi Li could only smile bitterly in her heart. She glared at Shu Qingchen secretly and gave him a look that said, "Explain it to me later." Shu Qingchen smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. After entering the study and sitting down, Princess Anchi quickly put the previous private matter to the back of her mind and became serious and focused. Shu Qingchen asked, "Did you get the commander's seal?" Princess Anchi shook her head in shame, saying, "I'm sorry, Qingchen. The place where we found the commander's seal was just a cover. It wasn't there at all." Shu Qingchen frowned slightly, saying, "Logically speaking, Shu Manlin shouldn't know that we're looking for the commander's seal. No outsider should know where the real commander's seal is. Why did she hide the military book so well and make it look like a trap for us?" Princess Anchi shook her head, saying, "Not many people on our side know about it. I can guarantee that they're all trustworthy." Shu Qingchen shook her head, "Of course we can trust your people. But this time, Anchi, don't you think there's something strange about it? In the past 6 months, it seems that every time we're about to catch Shu Manlin's fatal mistake, she'll escape first." Princess Anchi said angrily, "It's all because of father. Father is always partial to Shu Manlin for no reason. He says she's the saintess of Nanjiang and can't do those things. He says you're trying to sow discord between us. The most ridiculous thing is that it's a misunderstanding. Father is getting more and more muddle-headed these years." Chapter 201. Shu Qingchen asked thoughtfully, "Is the king of Nanjiao really senile?" Princess Anchi was startled. She looked sideways at Shu Qingchen and asked, "What do you mean?" Shu Qingchen said lightly, "We all thought that the king of Nanjiao was biased towards Shu Manlin, but this time, I was drugged and unconscious after I was caught that day. But I remember that I fainted around the end of the afternoon and woke up in the stone room around the quarter of the afternoon. You had already sent people to watch the Saint Ladies' Hall that day, so they could only go back through the palace. But the king of Nanjiao was usually resting in his bedroom during that time. Even if he wasn't there, the guards at the entrance of the secret passage weren't just for show. After that, Anchi, did you hear any rumors about this after you entered the palace?" Princess Anchi thought for a moment and shook her head, "No. When I reported your disappearance to my father, he was very worried and said he would send people to help me find you. But I refused." Shu Qingchen smiled faintly. How could the king of Nanjiao not know what happened in his bedroom? Especially when he clearly has people guarding that secret passage at all times. Princess Anchi was startled for a long time. She looked up at Shu Qingchen with disbelief and hesitation. "You mean that my father wasn't deceived by Shu Manlin at all, and he was biased towards Shu Manlin and helping her?" "Why? I'm my father's daughter, the crown princess of Nanjiao. I've never done anything unworthy of my status. Maybe it's because the princess is too worthy of your status." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said softly. Princess Anchi glanced at her sharply. "What do you mean, Miss Chu?" Yi Li blinked and looked at Princess Anchi. "There's a saying in the Central Plains. I don't know if the princess has heard of it before." Princess Anchi looked at her silently. Yi Li said in a low voice, "High merit overshadows the ruler. The princess and the king of Nanjiao are naturally father and daughter, but, although the princess calls the king of Nanjiao father, in my opinion, he should be the king's father. In the royal family, he should be the king first, then the father. And the princess is the same. She should be the subject first, then the daughter. These days in Nanjiao's capital, I've heard quite a bit of the princess's reputation. The people of Nanjiao praised the princess as a wise and far-sighted crown princess. Even a person of the Central Plains like me, who has just arrived in Nanjiao, has such an impression, let alone the common people of Nanjiang who have been graced by the princess." Princess Anchi paled and said in a trembling voice, "Are you saying that my father is afraid of me? Is that why you supported Shu Manlin to go against me and suppress me?" Yi Li sighed softly and looked at Princess Anchi with pity. "Your Highness, you must have read some history books of the Central Plains. Let's not talk about the distant ones, let's talk about the recent ones. Although Your Highness is in the southern border, I'm sure you have some understanding of the situation in King Ding's residence." Princess Anchi's pale lips trembled as she looked at Shu Qingchen for help. Shu Qingchen sighed softly. "Anchi, I once reminded you that going too far is as bad as not going far enough." Princess Anchi bit her lip and lowered her head in silence. Going too far was as bad as falling short. He had said this to her when they first met 4 years ago. But she didn't really take it to heart. Because she truly wanted the good of Nanzhao. She could tell anyone with a clear conscience that she never had any selfish motives. She thought that as long as she worked hard to share her father's burdens, her father would be happy. She thought that as long as Nanzhao became rich and powerful, and the common people lived in peace, her sister Xixia wouldn't have to go through a political marriage. But in the end, Xixia went to Dachu State to hide her identity and marry a man as a concubine. Her father had been secretly plotting how to keep her in check. Then all her efforts over the years, what were the things she had done? Looking at Princess Anqi's devastated expression, Yi Li and Shu Qingchen could only look at her silently. Such a blow was not something that could be resolved with a few words of comfort. Princess Anqi had to figure it out herself. The atmosphere in the study was solemn. Princess Anqi sat in her chair with her head lowered. Although nothing could be seen from her appearance, she was gripping the armrest so tightly that her fingers turned white. It was obvious that she was not calm at all. Yi Li praised in her heart. At least Princess Anqi knew how to control herself. This was rare, especially among women. After a long while, Princess Anqi looked up and broke the silence in the study. If I give up everything now, will Father, Anqi? Shu Qingchen frowned and shook his head. I don't know what the king of Nanzhao will do, but Shu Manlin. Anqi, Shu Manlin hates you. Do you understand? She won't let you go at all. And, she will definitely drag Nanzhao into hell. Is this what you want to see? Anqi looked at him in confusion. I know she hates me. At most, I'll go to the Central Plains, Shilling, or the Northern Tribes. But you said. What do you think she wants the commander's seal for? She wants to mobilize the guards of the capital to besiege your residence. I've talked to her a few times. She is very ambitious, but she doesn't have the strength to match her ambition, Shu Qingchen said. Princess Anqi's expression was solemn. She looked at Shu Qingchen hesitantly. You mean, she wants to, Shu Qingchen said, ask Liuyun what she did at the border between Nanzhao and the Dachu state. Princess Anqi turned to Yi Li. Yi Li said in a low voice, on our way to Nanjiang, we found a man-made snake valley not far from Shattered Snow Pass. Hidden behind the snake valley was a very large weapon refinery. All the weapons inside were the weapons used by the Dachu state soldiers. But I found some other things inside. Also, the one who controls this weapon refinery is the chief of the Luori tribe, Le Jiang. Man-made Snake Valley? She wants to make Dachu state's weapons? What does she want to do? Princess Anqi said angrily. The people of Nanjiang liked snakes, but they didn't like Nanjiang becoming a place full of poisonous snakes. So when Mo Xiaoyao set fire to the Snake Valley, it didn't arouse too much hatred from the people of Nanjiang. She didn't expect that in less than 10 years, another Snake Valley would appear in Nanjiang. As for making weapons from another country in Nanjiang, that crossed Princess Anqi's bottom line. Who knew if these weapons would be used against the people of Nanjiang one day? In Princess Anqi's eyes, this was treason. Did royal father know all of this? Was he kept in the dark by Shu Manlin, or was he pretending not to know? Or did royal father agree to Shu Manlin's plan? Shu Qingchen said, isn't it obvious? King Li helped the Saintess of Nanzhao obtain Nanzhao. In return, Shu Manlin will help King Li obtain Dachu state. Idiot! Princess Anqi scolded. Helping King Li obtain Dachu state was easier said than done. How big of a price would it have to pay? Not to mention the losses Nanzhao would suffer if they failed. Even if they succeeded, what benefits would Nanzhao receive? At that time, Nanzhao would have to rely on Mo Jingli, just like Nanjiang hundreds of years ago. I want to go to the palace and ask royal father, Princess Anqi said in unison. Chapter 202. Anqi. Shu Qingchen looked at her disapprovingly. Princess Anqi looked back at the two and said in a low voice, you don't have to persuade me. Qingchen. I don't know why you came to Nanzhao, but if it wasn't for you, I would have been tricked by Shu Manlin long ago. So, I still have to thank you. You are outsiders and this is the capital of Nanzhao. It may not be difficult for you to escape unscathed, but if father really decides to fall out with us, you won't be able to hold on for long. Leave Nanjiao as soon as possible. I'll do what I have to do. Xu Qingchen said, is it something you should do as the crown princess of Nanjiang to throw yourself into a trap? Princess Anshi smiled bitterly. The title of crown princess was bestowed by father. If father is determined to side with Xu Manlin, even 10 crown princesses won't be able to do anything. I must go and have a talk with father. Looking at Princess Anshi's resolute expression, the two knew they couldn't persuade her. Xu Qingchen said in a low voice, Anshi, take care. Anshi smiled and said, don't worry. I'm father's only daughter now. He won't kill me. Seeing Princess Anshi's figure disappear at the door, Yi Li sighed and asked Xu Qingchen, brother, aren't you moved at all? Princess Anshi is the most special woman I've ever seen. Xu Qingchen glanced at her indifferently and said, what nonsense are you talking about? Princess Anshi and I are friends. Yi Li blinked. Then why didn't you let me tell Princess Anshi the truth? That means you know it in your heart, right? Xu Qingchen looked at her angrily. Do you spend all your time thinking about these things? It's impossible to begin with. Why do you have to worry about it? Yi Li nodded. I understand. Princess Anshi is a proud woman. She knows you have a fiancé, so she won't have any thoughts about you in the future. But brother, you haven't been using this method to block your luck in love all these years, have you? Let me say this first, I was in the wrong this time. Don't even think about using me as a shield in the future. Xu Qingchen raised his hand and threw a booklet to Yi Li. Yi Li caught it and looked at the handwriting on it. It was a report from the Tianyi Pavilion on the situation in the capital of Nanjiao. Her heart sank. Brother, will Princess Anshi be all right? Xu Qingchen shook his head and said, even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. Princess Xixia is already a dead person. Anshi is indeed the only daughter of the Nanjiao king. Once something happens to Anshi, Nanjiao can only be handed over to the side branch of the imperial family to inherit, and the king of Nanjiao is not very prestigious. It is very likely that he will be removed from the throne because there is no successor. Yi Li raised her eyebrows in surprise. There's such a rule. Nanjiang is different from our central plains. Daughters can also inherit the throne, but there is no such thing as adoption. If there is no heir, the people of Nanjiang will think that because the king of Nanjiao is not protected by the gods, he is unable to protect his people, so it is natural for him to abdicate. Yi Li nodded. It is good that there is no danger. We can make other plans in the future. Miss An appeared at the door. What is it? Just now, the Tianyi Pavilion sent news that Master Liang can't take it anymore. Sickly Scholar took Master Liang to the place where the treasure is hidden. Young Master Han also rushed over. An said in a low voice. Damn it, why is he joining in the fun? Why is everything happening at the same time? Yi Li cursed in a low voice. She raised her head and ordered, you and An get ready. We will go immediately. Yes. An quickly disappeared at the door. Yi Li turned to Xu Qingchen and said, brother, I have to go first. If there is anything you need, just tell the Shadow Guard to do it. Since Princess Anshi said so, shouldn't you leave Nanjiao as soon as possible? Xu Qingchen shook his head. I still have some things to figure out. I am living here now. You be careful. Yi Li nodded. Brother, be careful too. Yi Li led An and An to quickly follow the marks left by the Tianyi Pavilion and the Shadow Guard. Fortunately, Nanjiang was not particularly vast. The area near the capital was naturally not very large. After riding for more than 4 hours, they finally found the address mentioned in the message from the Tianyi Pavilion. They found the mark left by Han Mingxi at the foot of the mountain. Young master, it is here. They have entered the mountain. Yi Li nodded. She turned and ordered, let's go separately. An objected. No, it is too dangerous for young master to go alone. Yi Li was helpless. An come with me. An follow secretly. Yes. She led An all the way into the mountain following the mark left by Han Mingxi. The mountain forests of Nanjiang were more humid than the north. There were all kinds of poisonous insects and plants. Fortunately, this was not a problem for the two. They went all the way in the direction of the mark. Young master, look ahead. Held her weapon in her hand and stared ahead vigilantly. Several men wearing the Tiani Pavilion's uniform were lying at the foot of the small hill in front of them. The blood from their wounds had already coagulated. It was obvious that they had been dead for a long time. Yi Li furrowed her brows. She tilted her head and listened carefully to the surroundings. She then pointed in another direction and said, "Let's go that way." Ansan took the lead and walked in front. Along the way, they saw some corpses of the Tiani Pavilion. Said in a low voice, "There are no people from our side." Yi Li frowned deeply and kept walking forward. After walking for more than an hour, they finally heard the faint sound of weapons clashing and people talking in front of them. The two looked at each other and carefully sneaked over. At the entrance of a cave, Sickly Scholar looked at the person sitting on the ground with a smug smile and said with a malicious smile, "Han Mingshi, do you really think that I don't dare to touch you because I'm afraid of your big brother? Your Tiani Pavilion has been against me all along the way. I'm being polite by sparing your life until now, right?" Han Mingshi fell to the ground awkwardly. The folding fan with famous inscriptions that he usually pretended to be elegant had been thrown to the side in the dust. He coughed twice and said, "If that's the case, why don't you kill me?" "Haha, don't worry. You've worked so hard for Chu Junwei. I should let you see him before you die. Isn't that right? Don't worry. When the time comes, I'll send him down to accompany you." Sickly Scholar sneered and said, "That guy surnamed Chu is really bold. He hasn't been in the Jianghu before, so he doesn't know my reputation. Don't you know Han Mingshi? When have I ever shared my things with others? He actually dared to ask me for a reward and even wanted the Biluo flower. Haha. Cough cough. Now that the Biluo flower is here, I'd like to see whether you, a friend is only known for a few days, or the priceless treasure is more important in his eyes." "Boring." Han Mingshi whispered disdainfully. Sickly Scholar was obviously very proud. He sneered and said, "Enjoy the rest of your time. You'd better pray that Chu Junwei really thinks you're important and can come here within 2 hours. Otherwise, I can only miss this good show and return your body to him." Yi Li quietly looked at the scene not far away and pondered with lowered eyebrows. After a while, San returned to her side and whispered, "There's no ambush around." Yi Li nodded and stood up to walk outside. San wanted to reach out and pull her back, but it was too late. Seeing Yi Li's back make a gesture to hide, San could only hide again. She looked at who was hiding on the other side and then stared at the grass outside the cave. Chapter 203. Seeing Yi Li leisurely walk over with her hands behind her back, Sickly Scholar's eyes flashed. "You really came." Yi Li calmly stepped forward. Her gaze swept over Han Mingshi, then slowly landed on Sickly Scholar. She smiled and said, "Third Master, it's not a good habit to burn bridges after crossing the river." Sickly Scholar narrowed his eyes and snorted. "Burning bridges after crossing the river? You can only blame yourself for being too greedy." Yi Li helplessly hit her palm with her folding fan and sighed. "This world is really not what it used to be. Forget it, I'll just take it that I'm unlucky this time. Tell me, what do you want? No matter what, how about letting Han Mingshi go first? I know you're not afraid of Han Mingyu, but I think Ling Taihan wouldn't want you to provoke the Tiani Pavilion. How dare you threaten me with Big Brother?" Yi Li waved the folding fan in her hand and said with a smile, "No, it just so happens that I have an elder brother who is Pavilion Master Ling's best friend. What's more, I told him before coming here. If something happens to us here, he'll naturally go home and report my death. Of course, he won't forget to inform young Master Mingyu and Pavilion Master Ling. What do you think? When it comes to making enemies, it's better to make as few as possible, right?" Sickly Scholar looked at Han Mingshi on the ground, then looked at Yi Li and said, "All right. Han Mingshi can go. You stay." Yi Li nodded. "No problem." Han Mingshi sat on the ground and didn't move. Yi Li frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Are you seriously injured?" Han Mingshi snorted and frowned. The cloth on his left leg was black. Obviously, he was seriously injured. Yi Li took 2 steps forward and asked with concern, "Mingshi, are you all right?" Han Mingshi looked up and shook his head. I'm fine. Junwei, you don't have to worry about me. Let's go. Yi Li shook her head and smiled. You got into trouble with Sickly Scholar because of me. How can I leave you behind? Mingxi, it was wrong of me to lie to you before. You should call me by my real name. The name Junwei. I'm actually not too used to it. Han Mingxi's face flashed with a strange color. He nodded and said, I know. Yi Li smiled and said, let me help you up. Han Mingxi nodded and raised his hand to take Yi Li's outstretched hand. No. The change seemed to happen in an instant. Han Mingxi's hand that was about to hold Yi Li suddenly changed. Like an eagle's claw, it grabbed Yi Li. At the same time, Yi Li leaned back. The hand that was holding the folding fan glowed with a brilliant silver light. Almost at the same time, a figure rushed out of the cave like lightning and threw himself at Yi Li. Yi Li frowned and the dagger in her hand flew out. Cough cough. The person who threw himself at Yi Li had the same face as Han Mingxi. But at this time, he looked particularly embarrassed. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Junwei. Junwei, are you okay? Yi Li pulled the person away and said coldly and angrily, I'm fine. The one who's not fine is you, idiot. The palm of the person opposite just hit him on the back. Yi Li raised her head and looked at the person like a knife. Young Master Mingyu, are you satisfied now? Han Mingxi. Han Mingyu had a dagger in her shoulder. Her dark red clothes were wet. He stared at the person supported by Yi Li, and his eyes were full of anger. Han Mingxi, you bastard, what are you doing? Who allowed you to come out? Han Mingxi leaned weakly on Yi Li. Yi Li's body was not tall to support his slender figure. Han Mingxi also looked at the man who looked almost the same as himself. He smiled provocatively and said, I already said that you can't fool Junwei if you want to pretend to be this young master with your lousy acting skills. Also, is this young master as a bastard as you? Presumptuous. Do you want to die for a person you just met a few days ago? Do you know who she is? Han Mingyu said coldly. Han Mingxi was startled. He gritted his teeth and said, no matter who she is, she's my friend. Even if I only know her for a few days, she's still better than you. At least Junwei will come to save me. You, if something happens to you, who will care about your life and death? Hearing her brother's roar, Han Mingyu was obviously stunned. She looked at the two people in front of her with a complicated expression. She quickly recovered and looked at Yi Li. She raised her eyebrows and said, Sister-in-law, please let go of my brother first. Han Mingxi's body stiffened. He looked down at Yi Li in disbelief. It was as if he wanted to see what she had to make Han Mingyu call her sister-in-law. After a long while, she sneered with difficulty. Big brother, you can't be confused after being stabbed, right? Don't go around claiming to be relatives. I don't have a second big brother. Han Mingyu sneered and pointed at Yi Li. Han Mingxi, open your eyes and look carefully. Is the person standing in front of you a man? Or have you been outside for so long that you can't even tell the difference between a man and a woman? Yi Li helped Han Mingxi to the side and sat down. Then she slowly pushed him away and looked at Han Mingxi apologetically. Brother Han Mingxi, I'm sorry I lied to you. Han Mingxi stared at her for a long time. Then he unwillingly curled his lips and said, all right, I know you're a woman. Seeing that we've gone through life and death together, you should at least tell me which sister-in-law you are, right? I don't want to hear that bastard say it. Yi Li looked back at Sickly Scholar, who was staring at her with hatred, and Han Mingyu, who was stupefied. She whispered, my name is Yi Li. Yi Li. Shu Qingchen is your big brother. That's right, Shu Qingchen is your big brother. Your third Miss Yi. You're. Han Mingxi stared at him. His expression was as uncomfortable as if he had swallowed a fly. He had seen third Miss Yi before. The problem was, how did this handsome young man look like that sly rich young lady who pretended to be elegant? He had already sworn to stay away from that woman. Why was he still hanging around her these days? You lied to me, Han Mingxi accused. Yi Li apologized. I'm sorry. Just because you're sorry? I want compensation. I want 10% of the Fragrant Elegance Pavilion. Yi Li nodded readily. No problem. Han Mingshi narrowed his eyes and continued to raise his conditions. At least 4 bottles of new perfume every year. Yi Li hesitated for a moment, but still nodded. Okay. Han Mingshi tilted his head and looked at her for a while. He seemed to be assessing whether her words were trustworthy or not. After a while, he raised his head and said proudly, "Since it's like this young master reluctantly forgives you for lying. I also admit that you, Yi Li, are my, Han Mingshi's, friend." Yi Li didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said helplessly, "Thank you, Brother Han, for being so magnanimous." Han Mingshi still snorted in dissatisfaction. He looked at Han Mingyu in disdain and said, "See? You still have the nerve to say that you know how to make money. The Han family is really counting on you to not starve to death." Han Mingyue's face darkened. She glared at Han Mingshi and said, "It's too late to talk nonsense. If you're done, then scram to the side." Han Mingshi rolled his eyes at him. "Are you stupid? This woman is my friend. She's my future business partner. Why don't you try touching her?" Chapter 204. Han Mingshi. Han Mingyu sternly said. "This young master knows what his name is." Han Mingshi lazily leaned against the hillside and picked at his ears. "Young Master Han, have you finished reminiscing? If you don't make a move, it will be too late when the people from the Ding Kingdom's estate arrive." Sickly Scholar's voice sounded sinisterly behind him. Han Mingyu lightly snorted and casually pulled out the dagger from his shoulder and threw it to the side. The injury on his shoulder caused him to involuntarily knit his brows. He indifferently looked at Han Mingshi and said, "Mingshi, stand to the side. Don't force me to make a move." Han Mingshi clenched his teeth and forcefully stood in front of Yi Li. He said, "You can touch her if you want to, but you have to hit me first." Han Mingyu didn't say anything else and reached out to grab Han Mingshi's shoulder. Han Mingshi had just suffered a palm strike. Although Han Mingyu promptly withdrew her inner strength, he still suffered a serious internal injury. At this moment, his left arm was simply too weak. Moreover, he wasn't Han Mingyue's opponent to begin with. Yi Li, who was standing behind Han Mingshi, pulled the person in front of her and pushed him away. At the same time, she didn't forget to block Han Mingyue's moves. Yi Li's inner strength was lacking, but she was extremely skilled in close combat. Every move she made was not the least bit fanciful. Every time the silver dagger flashed in her hand, it would always bring about a moderate amount of blood. Han Mingyu couldn't help but frown at such a murderous fighting style. He consecutively sent out a few palm strikes and retreated several meters. "I haven't seen you for almost a year. I didn't expect sister-in-law's skills to have improved so rapidly." If Yi Li was able to catch him off guard a year ago, then this time, the two of them were relying on real martial arts. Yi Li faintly frowned and said, "I don't dare to accept the title of sister-in-law. Mr. Han, I did business with the Tianyi Pavilion at a clear price, but now you're selling me to someone else. Is this how you do business? Could it be that Tianyi Pavilion thrives on deceiving customers?" Han Mingyue's expression was as sincere and helpless as ever. Wang Fei is still as humorous as ever. In this world, there were always many things that made people feel helpless. Even if they didn't want to do it, they still had to do it. Isn't that so? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and smiled. "If Mo Xiaoyao were here right now, would you say that it was a misunderstanding again?" Han Mingyu smiled but didn't say anything. Sickly Scholar sneered, "If Mo Xiaoyao is here, he'll die with you." Yi Li turned to look at the restless Sickly Scholar and said with a faint smile, "Third Pavilion Master, I advise you not to act rashly. If anything happens, I won't be able to explain it to Pavilion Master Ling." Sickly Scholar sneered angrily and took a step forward, wanting to say something. With a whoosh, 2 arrows, one from the left and one from the right, brushed past him one after the other and landed on the ground less than a foot away from him. Sickly Scholar's face turned pale. Yi Li smiled and said, "I've already told Third Pavilion Master that I don't like to take risks." Seeing Sickly Scholar's ugly expression, Han Mingyu chuckled and said, "Sister-in-law, you don't have to scare us. I've already lured the Shadow Guard away. Now that you're in such a hurry, there are at most 2 or 3 people with you." Yi Li smiled and said, "Even so, there are still 3 of us. What about you, Mr. Mingyu? Han Mingxi sat on the ground and said in a clear voice, not 3, it's 4. Clearly, he was determined to stand against his older brother. Han Mingyu ignored her younger brother and stared at Yi Li with a smile. Last time in Jing, Wang Fei made me look at you in a different light. This time, you've surprised me even more. The Ding Wang Fei has disguised herself as a man and come alone to Nanjiang. Presumably, the commotion in the palace yesterday was also Wang Fei's doing? Yi Li said faintly, Mingyu Gongzi was able to set up such a trap here today. Presumably, you've been in Nanjiao for a long time. Why ask when you already know the answer? Han Mingyu raised an eyebrow and said, it was just a coincidence. If I knew Wang Fei was here, I would have prepared well and wouldn't have taken such a risk. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, then, does Mingyu Gongzi think you can kill me today? Han Mingyu shook her head and said with a laugh, Wang Fei misunderstands. With Ding Wang Fei in hand, how many things can be done? If I kill you like this, wouldn't it spoil the fun? Han Mingyu. Sickly Scholar shouted in dissatisfaction. The reason why he cooperated with Han Mingyu's plan was to kill Mo Xiuyao's wife. What did Han Mingyu mean now? His malicious eyes stared coldly at the handsome man in front of him. If he dared to use him and didn't fulfill his promise, he would let him know why no one dared to provoke Sickly Scholar in Jianghu. Han Mingyu looked at Sickly Scholar and said with a faint smile, Third Pavilion Master, Ding Wang Fei really can't be killed yet. Although Third Pavilion Master is from Xiling, you should have heard of the surging winds in Daechu State's capital these past 6 months. If we kill Ding Wang Fei now, I'm afraid neither you nor I will be able to escape the pursuit of Ding Wang Fu. Sickly Scholar sneered and said, are you afraid? I'm not afraid. Who was better at killing than the Yangwang Chamber of Commerce? Han Mingyu helplessly lowered her head and said with a bitter smile, I'm really a little afraid. Third Pavilion Master, I'll take Ding Wang Fei away today. If Third Pavilion Master needs any help in the future, Han Mingyu will agree. Moreover, the one who has a grudge against you is Mo Xiuyao, not his wife. If you kill her, you'll at most make Mo Xiuyao lose face. It won't hurt you at all. Yi Li stared at young Master Mingyu in front of her with displeasure and sneered, Young Master Mingyu, when discussing the ownership of others, shouldn't you first confirm whether you really have the ownership? Third Pavilion Master, it's best not to deal with businessmen. Look at me now. Not only did I lose money, I was also sold. Han Mingyu smiled and said, my apologies, Princess Consort. The one who took your money is Han Mingxi. He didn't give a single cent to the Qiani Pavilion, so this time, at most, it can be considered that he used the power of the Qiani Pavilion to take on a private job. As for whether I have the ownership, Han Mingyu raised her hand and a crisp sound broke through the air. A flame bloomed in the middle of the day. Yi Li tilted her head and clearly heard a large group of people rushing over from all directions. Does Princess Consort have anything to say now? Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled. She raised her hand and made 2 hand gestures in the air. It seems that I have no choice but to surrender. Princess Consort is a smart person. Han Mingyu looked at Yi Li's strange hand gestures. He didn't understand what they meant. However, he clearly sensed that the 2 pairs of eyes that were staring at him covetously had disappeared. Presumably, they were telling the people to retreat. Every time we meet, Princess Consort's courage and insight always amazes me. Yi Li smiled and said, actually, you should be more shocked by my good luck. Han Mingyue's handsome eyes darkened and he stared at her vigilantly. The people of the Qiani Pavilion gradually surrounded them. Han Mingyu stared at Yi Li for a long time before she gradually relaxed. Surrounded by so many people, Yi Li wouldn't be able to fly out even if she had wings. Moreover, with his eyesight and the information about the Sickly Scholar, how could Han Mingyu not know? Yi Li's qinggong and internal energy were not good. Yi Li looked around and her expression was calm without the slightest hint of panic. Sister-in-law, Xiuyao and I are friends. You don't want me to be rude, right? Do you want to leave by yourself or? Han Mingyu looked at Yi Li and smiled warmly. Chapter 205. Yi Li frowned and shook her head. Actually, You can completely forget that you and Mo Xiaoyao were friends. The more you mention it, the more I hate you. Han Mingyu smiled. Even if you hate me, it doesn't change the fact that Mo Xiaoyao and I were once friends and brothers. You also said that it was in the past. Yi Li couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Was there something wrong with Han Mingyue's brain? On one hand, he was reminiscing about their past friendship, on the other hand, he was trying his best to destroy their remaining friendship. On the other hand, he was always talking about his friendship with Mo Xiaoyao, but he never showed any mercy when he attacked. Fine, he did show mercy last time, but didn't Mo Xiaoyao also show mercy? Young Master Han, you won't make things difficult for me this time because of someone, right? Han Mingyue's expression changed slightly. He told you. Do I need to tell you? I was there at the time, okay? However, Mo Xiaoyao also promised me something afterwards. Do you want to hear it? Han Mingyue's expression stiffened slightly. He smiled faintly. I'm all ears. I'm not used to repaying evil with good. I'm guessing that Mo Xiaoyao isn't either. That's why that was the only time. Han Mingyu forced a smile. It seems that Mo Xiaoyao really does value sister-in-law. Then, with sister-in-law in our hands, I believe that he will still show mercy to us. Yi Li smiled. I hope so. Since young Master Mingyu has already revealed his trump card, why don't we take a look at my bargaining chip? Han Mingyu was slightly startled. What do you mean? Yi Li raised her brows and whistled sharply. Not far away, an ink-colored flower exploded in the sky outside the Qiani Pavilion. Then, an ink-colored flame also rose into the sky from an even further place. Then, the sound of horse hooves could be heard from afar. Han Mingyu tilted her head and her expression changed. Black Cloud Cavalry. Why is Black Cloud Cavalry in the southern border? Upon hearing the name Black Cloud Cavalry, not only Han Mingyu, even Sickly Scholar and the people from the Qiani Pavilion were shocked. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud Cavalry was the most elite force in the Ding Kingdom. The Mohist army was invincible on the battlefield, and the Black Cloud Cavalry was the vanguard of this army, breaking through formations, killing enemies, and breaking through enemy lines. If they were really surrounded by such an army, not to mention the subordinates of the Qiani Pavilion that he had hurriedly mobilized in Nanjiang, even if the entire Qiani Pavilion and Yangwang Chamber of Commerce worked together, they would still have no chance of winning, let alone the subordinates of the Qiani Pavilion that he had hurriedly mobilized in Nanjiang. Yi Li was also surprised. She had only mobilized the Shadow Guard in the southern border, not the Black Cloud Cavalry. In reality, she didn't even know that the Black Cloud Cavalry existed in the southern border. Han Mingyu gritted her teeth and pounced on Yi Li. Once they were surrounded by the Black Cloud Cavalry, they wouldn't be able to break out. The only thing they could do now was to capture Yi Li and then escape. However, how could Yi Li be captured so easily? As soon as the two of them exchanged blows, Han Mingyue's clothes were torn. Fortunately, he dodged quickly and didn't get injured. If it was a normal duel, Yi Li's internal energy would be depleted as time passed, and she would definitely lose. However, if it was a life-and-death battle, Yi Li's battle awareness that had been honed on the battlefield and her techniques that had been tempered thousands of times were more useful. Moreover, Yi Li didn't plan to fight with him at all, even if it was just a matter of a dozen moves. The black-clothed men on horses were already in front of them, exchanging blows with the people of the Qiani Pavilion. The Qiani Pavilion was an intelligence organization, not an assassin organization, nor was it an escort agency or dojo. Even if the people under them knew martial arts, they wouldn't be that good. Of course, there were martial arts experts, but they were definitely in the minority. Compared to the Black Cloud Cavalry who had just returned from the battlefield with killing intent, the Qiani Pavilion would lose in terms of aura. Moreover, the Black Cloud Cavalry had always been well trained. While they were still on their horses, they already locked onto their targets and reaped the lives of their enemies with great teamwork. Two of the Black Cloud Cavalry jumped off their horses and pounced on Han Mingyu from the left and right. Seeing this, Yi Li's dagger slashed out a streak of light, blocking Han Mingyue's attack and quickly retreating. Han Mingyu wanted to go forward again, but she was already firmly entangled by the two Black Cloud Cavalry and couldn't break free. Sickly Scholar who was watching from the side was also not spared. The Black Cloud cavalry clearly knew Sickly Scholar's identity and didn't give him a chance to get close. Whips and spears were all thrown at him. An and an San landed next to Yi Li. Yi Li asked curiously, "Why would the Black Cloud cavalry appear here?" An said in a deep voice, "Princess, something has happened. The original Shadow Guard has been transferred away by Qing Chen Gongzi. This Black Cloud cavalry was originally training near Yong province and came to pick up Princess." What happened? To have the Black Cloud cavalry in Yong province travel hundreds of li to pick her up? Yi Li was shocked. Mo Jingli? An nodded and said, 3 days ago, Ling province's army suddenly attacked Yong province. At the same time, Shattered Snow Pass was also attacked by Nan Zhao's army. The Black Cloud cavalry knew that Princess was in Nanjiang, so they traveled through the night to pick up Princess and Qing Chen Gongzi. Yi Li's face sank. Nonsense. Since Nan Zhao's army is attacking Shattered Snow Pass, why didn't the Black Cloud cavalry help General Mu Rong guard the border? An grimaced. The Black Cloud cavalry's training in the south was done in secret. They didn't report to the emperor beforehand. Once the Black Cloud cavalry appears in Shattered Snow Pass, I'm afraid that the emperor's decree will immediately reach the Ding King's Fu. In reality, the emperor didn't want the Black Cloud cavalry or the Mohist army to have any training. He wanted to find a place to encircle them and raise them. It would be best if they were crippled. I know, finish this quickly. Her clear eyes swept over Han Mingyu, who was still fighting. A cold light flashed through Yi Li's eyes. Sai didn't send a letter, which proved that Han Mingyu didn't come back and came directly from Xiling to Nanjiang. When they were in the capital, Han Mingyu wanted to bury the hatchet with Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li believed that his thoughts at that time were true. But now that he had just arrived in Nanjiao, he didn't hesitate to kidnap her to threaten Mo Xiaoyao. What did he come to Nanjiao for? A well-trained army was completely different from the Jianghu. Therefore, the Black Cloud cavalry only needed a few minutes to sweep through the entire battlefield. Sickly Scholar ran away in a sorry state. A Black Cloud cavalry nimbly took out a bow from his back, took aim, and released an arrow. The long sword shot towards Sickly Scholar's back with the force of thunder. Suddenly, a black shadow swept out and swept the sword towards the feather arrow. With 2 clangs, sparks flew in all directions. A tall and imposing man dressed in dark blue stood with a sword in his hand. He laughed in a clear voice. The Black Cloud cavalry's unparalleled archery truly lives up to its reputation. Behind him, Sickly Scholar fell to the ground, his face white as paper. He called out in a low voice, "Big brother." The Black Cloud cavalry all drew their bows, dozens of bows pointing towards the blue-clothed man. Yi Li raised her hand and said, "Stop, let Pavilion Master Ling leave." The blue-robed man was none other than the King of Hell's Pavilion Master, Ling Taihan. Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows as he looked at Yi Li, then cupped his hands and said, "Princess Consort, third brother is ignorant and has offended you, please forgive him." Yi Li nodded and smiled. "My big brother and Pavilion Master Ling are close friends. Pavilion Master need not be so polite." But third Pavilion Master's temper. Ling Taihan sighed and turned his head to glance at Sickly Scholar on the ground. "My third brother's fate is full of misfortune, and his temperament is perverse. This one will definitely restrain him. This is the Yama token. In the future, if Wang Fei has any matters, just use the token to send someone to the Yangwang chamber to find me. As long as the Yama token is in my hands, third brother will definitely not make a move against Wang Fei." Yi Li raised her hand to catch the black iron token that Ling Taihan tossed over. She carefully put it away and said, "Many thanks to Pavilion Master." Ling Taihan bent down to pick up Sickly Scholar and said, "Since it's like this, goodbye." Chapter 206. I Won't See You Out. After watching Ling Taihan leave, Han Mingyu was already at the end of her rope under the attacks of several Black Cloud cavalry. She was barely holding on. The Black Cloud cavalry didn't have any thoughts of using numbers to bully the enemy. As long as they could defeat the enemy, they wouldn't feel guilty even if there were 100 of them. They were soldiers, not chivalrous people. Junwei. Han Mingshi, who had been silently watching them, walked over to Yi Li with his heavily injured body. Yi Li glanced at Han Mingyu, who was still fighting, and sighed helplessly. I beg you, let my big brother go. Han Mingshi looked at her, his eyes full of bitterness. Although he already knew her true identity, he really wanted to be friends with her. However, he also knew that if he begged for mercy, they wouldn't be friends anymore. I need Prince Mingyu to provide me with some information. Yi Li frowned. She didn't want to keep Han Mingyu alive. Han Mingyu gave her a very bad feeling. If she hadn't been on guard against Han Mingyu from the start and secretly made arrangements when she sensed something was wrong, she really would have fallen into Han Mingyu's hands this time. However, seeing Han Mingshi's weary expression due to his heavy injuries, she couldn't refuse. He won't say anything. I can tell you whatever you want to know. After all, they were brothers who grew up together. Han Mingshi knew his big brother very well. If he didn't want to say something, he wouldn't say anything. Han Mingshi, shut up. Han Mingyu, who was in the middle of the fight, shouted. Another new wound appeared on her shoulder. Seeing Han Mingyu's body gradually covered in wounds and being reprimanded by his brother again, Han Mingshi was finally furious. You're the one who's going to shut up. If you want to die, don't drag the subordinates of the Tianyi Pavilion down with you. Look at all the people here. It's all because of you. The Tianyi Pavilion was based in the Da Chu state. The Han clan was also based in the Da Chu state. Was there something wrong with your head? Why did you provoke Mo Xiaoyao? Is that woman more important than your parents and ancestors? Fine, you want to die, right? I don't want to live anymore. I'll die with you. Han Mingyu was stunned by her brother's sudden outburst. A black cloud cavalry took the opportunity to kick him in the crook of his leg, and 3 blades were immediately placed against his neck. Han Mingyu lowered her head to look at the gleaming blade on her neck, before raising her head to look at Yi Li with a helpless smile. Looks like I've lost again. If you want to kill me or beat me, do as you please. Also, Han Mingshi, are you out of your mind? Don't make it sound like you're going to commit suicide. Han Mingshi thought back to the words he had scolded when he was in a towering rage, as well as the faintly discernible gazes of the black cloud cavalry beside him. His handsome face couldn't help but darken. He had lost all the face he had in his life today. Yi Li looked at the dark-faced Han Mingshi. She rolled her eyes and said, Brother Han Mingshi, you can take young Master Mingyu away. Han Mingshi was overjoyed. He looked at Yi Li gratefully. Even Han Mingyu had a look of astonishment. Yi Li looked at Han Mingyu with a faint smile and said indifferently, but there are conditions. Han Mingshi didn't expect Yi Li to be so agreeable. He didn't care about the conditions. He wasn't Han Mingyu, who loved money as much as his life. It was already a great surprise that his brother was still alive. Yi Li leisurely took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Han Mingshi. Drink it. Han Mingshi raised his brows and drank it without hesitation. Han Mingyu wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Han Mingshi smacked his lips and said in disdain, so disgusting. Yi Li smiled and said, this is a poison personally made by the divine Dr. Shenyang, the ingredients are a secret. As for the effects, if you don't take the antidote once a month, your meridians will rupture and your entire body will be paralyzed. Because the smell is too disgusting, it's hard for people to eat it by mistake, so it's not very practical. But there will always be people who are willing to eat it, right? Han Mingshi giggled and said, I know Jun Wei won't take my life. Yi Li raised her brows. Watch your brother closely. I will send someone to deliver the medicine to you once a month. Once I find out when he leaves your sight or does something he shouldn't do, I will personally make him bleed. I will let him see with his own eyes that you are bleeding all over and in so much pain that you wish you were dead. Han Mingshi nodded and laughed. I understand. Big brother, for your only brother's life, you will be obedient, right? Blinking his bewitching eyes, he pitifully looked at Han Mingyu. Han Mingyu gloomily stared at Yi Li and said, how do I know you won't lie to me? Will you deliver the antidote on time? Yi Li lightly said, Han Mingshi is my friend. Han Mingyu sneered, friend? Is this how you treat your friend? Yi Li lightly smiled and said, if you can treat your brother like that, why can't I treat my friend like that? If you don't do that, I naturally won't do that. In this way, Han Mingshi won't have any problems. Isn't that the same as, I didn't do anything? Han Mingyu narrowed her eyes. What if I find someone to make the antidote? Aya, I heard that this bottle of poison was made by Mr. Chen from a small island in the Eastern Sea. There is no similar medicine in the Central Plains. If Mr. Han is so resourceful that you can find the medicine and make the antidote in a month, then I will consider myself unlucky. Anyway, the Black Cloud Cavalry has tens of thousands of people, so it shouldn't be too hard to send out a few hundred to chase someone all year round. Coincidentally, I have a Yama's decree in my hands. I don't know if Pavilion Master Ling is willing to use this Yama's decree to kill his friend who used his brother. If I'm even more unlucky, the Ding Palace has plenty of money. Don't you think so, Mr. Han? Han Mingyu snorted and didn't say anything else. Han Mingshi didn't care at all and pushed away the sword on Han Mingyue's neck. He smiled at Yi Li and said, Junwei, don't worry. I guarantee that Big Brother won't ruin your plans again. If you want to know, I will send someone to bring it to you. So, Yi Li smiled and said, if you can really take care of your brother, I can forget about today's matter. But, if there is a next time, Brother Han, you won't use your please every time. I understand. Han Mingshi nodded seriously and reached out to seal Han Mingyue's pressure points to seal his internal energy. He waved his hand at Yi Li and pulled her away. This subordinate greets Princess. The Black Cloud Cavalry all bowed. Yi Li nodded, you can all stand up. What is going on with you? Seeing the fierce and awe-inspiring black-clothed cavalry, Yi Li praised them in her heart. As expected of the most elite army in the Da Chu state. Just this aura alone wasn't something normal soldiers could compare to. Moreover, in the battle just now, the Black Cloud Cavalry had traveled a long way without any casualties. It was enough to see how strong this troop was. A strong man at the front stepped forward and said, reporting to Princess, 3 days ago, the Ling Province garrison suddenly launched an attack on Yong Province. At the same time, the Nanjiao army also began to attack Shattered Snow Pass. General Murong is guarding Shattered Snow Pass. The Nanjiao army has been attacking for a day and a night without any success. But, the Ling Province garrison has been unstoppable. I believe that they will reach Shattered Snow Pass in less than 10 days. At that time, General Murong will be attacked from both sides. Chapter 207. Does the capital know about this? The man nodded. They've already sent it to the capital. By tomorrow at the latest, the news will reach the capital. However, it will take at least half a month for the reinforcements to arrive. I'm afraid. Shattered Snow Pass won't last that long. Just now, young Master Qing Chen also ordered his subordinates to send a message to Wang Fei. The Crown Princess of Nanjiao has been placed under house arrest by the King of Nanjiao. The King of Nanjiao has decreed that the Saintess of Nanjiang will be the Saintess of Nanjiang. Young Master Shu asked Wang Fei to leave Nanjiao as soon as possible. Young Master Shu said, we were all fooled by the King of Nanjiao. Yi Li's expression was dignified. She nodded and asked, where did Dage go? The man said, young Master Shu brought the Shadow Guard and said he had something to do. After that, he will leave Nanjiang. Yi Li frowned and thought for a moment, send a group to find Dage and escort him out of Nanjiao as soon as possible. If he doesn't agree, then knock him out and take him away first. The rest of you, follow me to Shattered Snow Pass as soon as possible. Yes, Wang Fei. The Black Cloud Cavalry quickly divided into 2 groups. One group of about 20 people was led by one person and the rest stayed in place to wait for orders. Yi Li asked, what kind of army are there near Shattered Snow Pass? The leading man looked at Yi Li with some surprise and replied respectfully, a few months ago, Prince did deploy some people near Yongju and Lingju. However, the Emperor is very strict with the Ding Palace. It's impossible to mobilize the army on a large scale. Moreover, most of the Mohist army is also responsible for intimidating the northern tribes. Therefore, only the 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry and the 20,000 troops under Wu Chengliang in Yongju can play a role near Yongju. As soon as the battle broke out, we immediately sent a message to Wu Chengliang. If there are no accidents, he should arrive at Shattered Snow Pass tomorrow afternoon. Yi Li frowned for a moment and shook her head, no. Let him lead troops to reinforce the Yongju garrison to stop the Li King's army. There are 80,000 troops stationed at Shattered Snow Pass. As long as General Murong doesn't go out to fight with the enemy, it's not a problem to defend the city for half a month. Once Prince Li's army reaches Yonglin City and forms an encirclement with Nanjiao, even 20,000 more soldiers and horses will be useless. The leader of the group was also surprised. He quickly said, "This subordinate will immediately send someone to inform Chief Commander Wu. If we travel without stopping, we will definitely be able to catch up with them before they cross the river tomorrow." After saying that, he quickly turned around and instructed someone to deliver the message. Yi Li rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She had a bad feeling in her heart. "Pass down the order. There's no need to go back to the city. Go directly to Snow Shattering Pass at the fastest speed." "Yes." All of a sudden, the flames of war seemed to have ignited. Yi Li could not help but feel a little absent-minded. She raised her head and looked at the sky that was covered with dark clouds. Her heart grew heavier and heavier. Shattering snow pass on top of the sturdy and ancient mottled city walls, the soldiers stationed there gripped their swords and spears tightly and were ready for battle. Their young faces were stained with traces of exhaustion. Today, they had repelled 3 attacks from the Nanjiao army and were ready to welcome the next wave of attacks. Murong Shun was 40 years old, and his angular face had a resolute expression. Holding a long spear in his hand, he walked on top of the city gate tower. His brows, as thick as knives, were tightly furrowed. From the day he was sent to guard Snow Shattering Pass, he knew that Snow Shattering Pass would not be peaceful. But he did not expect that the true danger would not only come from the restless Nanjiao, but also from the interior of Da Chu State, the emperor's younger brother, Prince Li. He couldn't help but think back to the anonymous letter he received when he left the capital. There were only 4 simple words on it: "Be careful of Lingju." So this was what it meant. The other party had long known that Prince Li had bad intentions, but unfortunately, he did not attract enough attention. Or rather, the circumstances did not allow him to pay attention. The emperor needed him to guard the border, but because he had once competed with the previous Prince Ding, he was not willing to give him enough military power. The local officials also restricted him at every turn. And now, even though he knew that once Prince Li captured Yongju and formed an encirclement around Snow Shattering Pass, he had no way to retreat. Because in front of Snow Shattering Pass, he had to face hundreds of thousands of Nanjiao people. Once they crossed Snow Shattering Pass, they would sweep through the entire south of Da Chu State like a plague. Hopefully, the reinforcements could make it in time. "Father." A clear voice came from behind him. Murong Shun turned around. Murong Ting, dressed in red, walked up the gate tower with a sword in her hand. Murong Shun's face darkened. He said sternly, "What are you doing here? Go down." "Father." Murong Ting said firmly, "Daughter will guard the city with father." "Nonsense. I told you to leave Snow Shattering Pass immediately. Why haven't you left yet?" Murong Shun loved his only daughter like a treasure. Now that Snow Shattering Pass was in danger, he had to stay and face his only daughter, but he wanted her to leave first. Murong Ting stubbornly bit the corner of her lips and said, "Ting is not unaware of the current situation. If I leave Snow Shattering Pass now and fall into Prince Li's hands and be used to threaten father, then daughter can only die." Seeing that Murong Shun wanted to say something, Murong Ting interrupted him and said, "If father wants me to protect me back to the capital, then that's even more unacceptable. Now that the Nanjiao army is about to attack the city, it's time for people. Ting is the daughter of the general of Snow Shattering Pass, but you still have to take people who can be used to leave. If you do this, Ting is not worthy of being the daughter of the Murong family." Murong Shun was speechless at his daughter's words. After a while, he sighed and said, "Snow Shattering Pass is very dangerous now." Murong Ting said proudly, "When father goes to war, when is it not dangerous? Since father wants to guard Snow Shattering Pass, Ting as a descendant of a general, naturally can't retreat." Murong Shun knew his daughter's temperament. He also knew that the road back to the capital was not safe. He could only sigh, "Forget it. Be careful." "Thank you, father." Seeing that Murong Shun did not insist, Murong Ting was overjoyed, Ting will definitely not lose father's face. Wang Fei, something bad has happened. Yi Li and the others rushed to Snow-Shattering Pass without stopping. Nanjiao and Prince Li's attack was too sudden. When the Black Cloud cavalry entered Nanjiang, it had already attracted many people's attention. Naturally, it would not be as smooth as when they came. Yi Li could only take an and San and a few Black Cloud cavalry soldiers. The others scattered and returned to Dongchu. What happened? Yi Li frowned and pulled on the reins. The Black Cloud cavalry soldier whispered, Commander Wu Chengliang was assassinated. The reinforcements from Yongju were ambushed as soon as they crossed the river. The entire army was destroyed. Yi Li's heart trembled. How far are we from Snow-Shattering Pass now? An said, there's still half a day's journey. But Snow-Shattering Pass has been surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Nanjiao soldiers. I'm afraid we won't be able to enter the pass even if we get there. Yi Li said, take a detour. Don't worry about Snow-Shattering Pass. Go to Yonglin first. Prince Li's army should be arriving soon. Yes, Wang Fei. Snow-Shattering Pass was still the same as it was a few days ago. Sounds of killing and war drums shook the sky. Murongshun looked at the Nanjiao generals shouting at the city gates with a heavy expression. Staying in seclusion for several days in a row was a serious blow to the morale of the soldiers. Many of the generals by his side could not help but want to go out of the city to fight, but they were all stopped by him. General, please let this subordinate go out of the city to fight. The young general pleaded firmly, his eyes filled with unyielding anger. The Nanjiao soldiers were shouting and cursing at the city gates every day, but they could only stay in seclusion. This made these young and aggressive soldiers hold a fire in their hearts. Chapter 208. Shut up. The most important thing now is to defend the city, not to fight for personal feelings. We can't let the Nanjiao army step into the broken snow pass. This is the purpose of guarding the border. Wait for the reinforcements. The young general looked at him in disbelief and asked, can the reinforcements make it in time? They only had 80,000 soldiers, while the Nanjiao army surrounding them and the Prince of Li's army from Lingju outflanked them from behind had at least 300,000 soldiers. Murongshun was silent for a moment and said firmly, there's still time, as long as we can defend the broken snow pass. So, don't fight for personal feelings. The young general glanced unwillingly at the clamoring Nanjiao soldiers and gritted his teeth. Yes, General. General. The messenger came in a hurry. General, it's reported that Lord Wu Chengliang, the general of Yongju, led 20,000 soldiers to reinforce. They were ambushed just after crossing the Yunlan River, and Lord Wu died. Everyone present couldn't help but gasp. Murongshun only felt that the world was spinning in front of him. He quickly stabilized himself and said, how can it be? How can Prince Li be so fast? Report. General, the governor of Yongju surrendered to Prince Li last night. Early this morning, Prince Li's army broke into Qingyuan City. The vanguard will probably arrive outside Yonglin City this evening. All the generals were shocked. There weren't many soldiers defending Yongju. As the highest official in Yongju, the governor of Yongju surrendered to Prince Li. No wonder Prince Li's army could be so powerful all the way. They thought they could delay for 10 days, but they were afraid that the broken snow pass would be surrounded in less than 2 days. Thinking of this, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Murongshun was so angry that he laughed. Good. What a good governor of Yongju. Who is willing to defend Yonglin City? Several young generals came out at the same time. General, we are willing to go. Murongshun looked at the young men in front of him who looked serious and nodded. Good. Yunting, Xia Shu, I will give you 20,000 soldiers to defend Yonglin. Understand? Yes, General. The two young men replied in unison. After receiving the military order, they turned around and left. No one asked how they were going to defend Yonglin and how long they would have to defend it for. Looking at the backs of the two young men, Murongshun glanced at the generals present and said, we'll do the same. Understand? Yes, General. Yonglin City, which was usually quiet, was now in a solemn state. The shops on both sides of the street were closed, and not a single person could be seen on the street. Compared to the stifling and oppressive atmosphere of shattering snowpass, Eternal Forest City was already filled with the glint of blades and shadows of swords. Below the city walls, the soldiers who had set up ladders tried their best to climb up the city walls, but they were forced back down by the people on the city walls with stones and arrows. When the people in front fell, there would naturally be people at the back who would take their places. The soldiers on the city gate tower were also shot down from time to time by the divine archers below, falling to the ground until they were beyond recognition. At this moment, no one cared about these things anymore. Everyone could only crazily kill each other. Everyone had forgotten that they were all from Dhu state and were once comrades. In a pair, only you die and I live. How about it? I'll go up first. On the city walls, two young generals looked solemn. I'll go first. Pulling out his sword, the young general turned around and left. The person who was left behind, watching them leave, humphed helplessly. He turned around and pulled out his sword to cut down a person who was trying to climb up the city gate tower while the soldiers on the city walls were shot down. The city gates were opened, and the young general led a group of people and rushed out. They rushed into the enemy's formation and rampaged, reducing the pressure on the city walls once again. The young general took the lead and killed countless people along the way. Soon, a burly middle-aged man blocked his way. The middle-aged man held a broadsword and swept away the people around him. He mocked, "Is there no one else under Murongshan's command? You actually sent a brat who is still wet behind the ears to block my way. If you know what's good for you, immediately open Yonglin City for me, and I'll spare your life." The young general sneered, "I don't accept nameless people under my command. Where did this renegade come from? Tell me your name, and I'll leave your corpse intact. I'm Sun Wei, the vanguard of the Western Army personally appointed by Prince Li." The young general rolled his eyes. "So it's Mo Jingli, that traitor, Sun Wei. I've never heard of you. Die obediently." The long sword in his hand was fast and ruthless. He mercilessly slashed at the man who claimed to be the vanguard of the Western Army. For a moment, the man was flustered and finally died in the hands of the brat he looked down upon. The young general spat disdainfully, "You're just a pussy. How dare you show off in front of me?" The vanguard was killed, and the besieging army was suddenly in chaos. The general who was left behind to guard the city took the opportunity to command the army to attack. Not long after, the besieging army retreated in panic. Xie Shu, how was it? Back on the city wall, looking at the defeated enemy, the young general, who had just shown his skills and vented the depression of these days, was beaming with joy. The young man called Xie Shu looked into the distance and frowned. They should be the vanguard of the enemy. Although they were killed, when the Real elites come, the young general couldn't help but frown. The joy of the victory just now gradually dissipated. Not to mention hundreds of thousands of soldiers, even hundreds of thousands of pigs could trample them to death. It was already very difficult for 20,000 people to defend the city, not to mention to go out of the city to meet the enemy. Yonglin City was not like broken snowpass. If they defended and didn't go out, Prince Li's army might bypass Yonglin City first. Although it was a little troublesome, it was not impossible. Once broken snowpass was taken, their isolated city with only 20,000 people would be in the bag. Who cares? If they come, I'll beat them back all the same. I, Yun Ting, am not a coward. The young general snorted. Xie Shu also gradually revealed a smile. You're right. Let's make it clear first, it's my turn next. Perhaps because the vanguard troops in front of them were defeated and returned, the troops behind them came later than they expected. They didn't hear the sound of war drums until the next morning. Xie Shu and Yun Ting stood on the city gate tower and looked down. Yun Ting couldn't help but gasp. Mo Jingli brought out all the troops in Lingju, right? The front of Yonglin City wasn't spacious, but at a glance, the fluttering banners and the densely packed figures made people not want to estimate the number of troops. Xie Shu said in a low voice, "When we were in the capital, I heard that Prince Li was an idiot. Now it seems that it's not entirely true." Looking at Prince Li's troops below the city, they were strict and orderly. They didn't look like an army that an idiot could bring out. Yun Ting curled his lips and said, "Either he has an expert under him, or his pretending to be crazy? Can an idiot start a rebellion? He's crazy. A few people came out from the enemy's troops. One of them, a middle-aged man who was obviously not a general, shouted upstairs, "The guards upstairs, listen up. Immediately open the city gate and let us in." Yunting curled his lips. "Who are you? Do you think we'll let you in just because you said so?" The middle-aged man said, "I'm the governor of Yongju. Yongju has already submitted to Prince Li. Why don't you immediately open the city gate and let Prince Li in?" Hearing this, Yunting couldn't help but curse in a low voice. "I was wondering who it was. So it's just a traitor. There's a path to heaven but you don't want to take it. As a traitor, you should find a place to hide. How dare you come out and show off?" He took out the bow and arrow from the back of the soldier next to him and shot at the governor of Yongju without hesitation. Chapter 209. The Yongju governor, who was speaking proudly on horseback, was pulled back by someone beside him. The arrow flew past his ear. He was so frightened that he screamed and almost fell off his horse. Yunting clicked his tongue with some regret. "Your luck is too bad." The Yongju governor's persuasion was useless. One of them waved his hand and had someone send him back to the army. Only then did he raise his head and say to the two people on the city gate tower, "Are the two generals Yunting and Xie Shu on the city gate tower? The two of you only have 20 to 30,000 soldiers at most. You can't stop my 200,000 soldiers. Why put up a stubborn resistance? Actually, we are all citizens of the Dhu state. If there are any losses, everyone will feel bad, right?" Yunting spat and sneered. "What a joke. Do you still know that you are a citizen of the Dhu state? I thought it was some traitor's dog barking here." The expression of the people below the city changed slightly. They quickly continued to laugh. "The emperor is tyrannical. King Li is the true son of heaven. We should naturally follow King Li's orders." Spit. Yunting raised his hand and shot another arrow. Seeing that the other party easily dodged it, he didn't care. He shouted angrily, "I have seen many shameless people, but I have never seen someone as shameless as you. The emperor is tyrannical. Did the emperor kill your parents or steal your wife? The true son of heaven. Do you think I have never heard of it when I was far away at the border? Seducing your future sister-in-law before marriage and getting caught with another woman on the day of the marriage. Also, fainting on the day of the wedding. If your body is so weak, stay at home and rest. Don't come out and embarrass yourself." Xie Shu, who was standing on the side, heard Yunting's angry scolding and looked embarrassed. The soldiers on the city gate couldn't help but laugh loudly. Even King Li's soldiers below the city gate had strange expressions. The general who wanted to persuade the other party to surrender wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. He pointed at Yunting hatefully and said, "Good brat, don't fall into my hands. Otherwise, I will make you wish you were dead." Yunting raised his chin and said arrogantly, "Just you wait." Behind the heavy army, Mo Jingli's face was pitch black. His gloomy and cold aura made the generals around him not dare to make a sound. Although they were far away from the front, Yunting's words were transmitted using internal energy. The generals by Mo Jingli's side all knew some martial arts, so they naturally heard everything clearly. Mo Jingli's expression turned ugly. "Attack the city. I want that brat alive. Yes." The person beside him waved his hand, and the sound of a war drum shook the sky. The army on the drum had begun to attack the city. Mo Jingli clearly wanted to end the battle quickly, taking down most of the areas south of the Cloud Mist River before the Imperial Court's reinforcements arrived. Therefore, even if it was a small city like Yonglin, he did not show any mercy. After all, Shattered Snowpass was behind Yonglin. This time, Yunting and Xie Shu clearly felt the pressure that was several times greater than yesterday. Just defending the city wall was already too much for them, not to mention diverting troops out of the city to fight. Even if they could divert some troops, once they were surrounded by tens of thousands of troops, they would not be able to return. The huge round wooden stakes under the city wall began to hit the city gate. Even the entire city wall seemed to be trembling with the heavy thuds. The soldiers on the city wall fell down one by one, But the enemies who wanted to climb up the city gate tower seemed to be endless. Enchanting and Shu also kept waving their weapons to fill in the gaps caused by the deaths of the soldiers. The air was filled with the thick smell of blood. Seeing that the defenders on the city wall were getting fewer and fewer, Enchanting's white battle robe was full of blood. How unlucky. This is the first time I personally lead an army into battle. Is it going to be completely wiped out? Don't worry. If you die, the imperial court will definitely confer you the title of general. Shu twitched his lips and said with a faint smile. Thank you for your comfort. I still want these bastards to die first. Enchanting said. He raised his sword and stabbed an enemy who climbed up the city gate tower and wanted to attack Shu from the side. Then he picked up the corpse and directly threw it down to the people who wanted to climb up the ladder. Brothers, hold on for me. If we let these traitors pass Shattered Snow Pass, we will be finished. Shattered Snow Pass has been built for hundreds of years and those southern border barbarians have never stepped in. We can't let it be destroyed in our hands. Enchanting raised his arms and shouted. The soldiers guarding the city roared in unison, defend Yonglin to the death. They were all soldiers, but those who were stationed in the country found it difficult to understand the mentality of the soldiers who were stationed at the border. Guarding the country was the most important glory and mission in their hearts. It was also the responsibility that was engraved in their bones. In the mountain forest a few miles away from Yonglin City, Yi Li stood under the shade of a tree on a hillside and looked into the distance. The sound of soldiers and horses could be heard clearly even from a few miles away. Wang. Gongzi, Yonglin City can't hold on anymore. And San quickly walked over and reported. Yi Li lowered her head and said, it's not bad to be able to hold on for so long with only 20,000 men. Who is guarding Yonglin City now? Immerse said, it's General Murong's 2 lieutenants, Enchanting and Shu. Yi Li frowned, only 2 lieutenants. Immerse nodded, there are not many generals guarding Shattered Snow Pass. These 2 are General Murong's most promising subordinates. They are also the 2 young generals that General Murong values the most. That Enchanting even killed Prince Li's vanguard yesterday. Yi Li frowned, Mo Jingli is also in the army. Immerse nodded and pointed to a place in the distance where a banner was fluttering. Prince Li should be there. Gongzi, should we? Yi Li shook her head, Mo Jingli must be heavily guarded. Besides, he himself is not a mediocre person. It's almost impossible to catch the leader first. Immerse, and San. Yes. Pick a few people and kill Yongzhou's governor. Immerse and San looked at each other and said in a clear voice, this subordinate obeys. Yi Li said in a deep voice, as long as we kill Yongzhou's governor, don't do anything else and retreat immediately. Yes. Then Gongzi, you. Yi Li sighed softly and looked at the blue sky, I'll go with the Black Cloud Cavalry. The Black Cloud Cavalry commanders standing behind her looked at Yi Li with respect. Even though they should listen to Wang Fei's orders, but a Wang Fei who was nimble and smart was easier for these proud and powerful soldiers to accept than a master who only had looks and talent. Even though they hadn't known each other for long, but these days, Wang Fei had followed them on horseback and traveled 100 li a day. She was even more agile than normal soldiers. This caused the Black Cloud Cavalry to truly submit to this mistress. Immerse and San also knew that even though they were called Shadow Guard, Wang Fei did not need people to follow and protect her at all times. Wang Fei had sent them to carry out various missions for their future. She hoped that they would be able to stand openly in the crowd and not just be bodyguards who could not see the light of day. This subordinate obeys. Immerse said. At the same time, he exchanged a look with the Black Cloud Cavalry commanders. Wang Fei's safety is in your hands. Chapter 210. The leader of the Black Cloud Cavalry raised his eyebrows and agreed. Is everything ready? When Immerse and San left, Yi Li turned around and asked. Gongzi, everything is ready. We can set off at any time. Yi Li nodded, very good. Divide into 4 groups and enter the battlefield from the 2 wings. After a quarter of an hour, the rest of the people get ready to move. Yes. The situation on the battlefield was getting more and more difficult. In the beginning, Only 1 or 2 enemies climbed up the city wall and were immediately killed. Later on, the enemies who climbed up the city wall could still kill a few people. Although they didn't cause too much harm for now, they wouldn't be able to last much longer. Enchanting finally didn't have time to waste his energy shouting and cursing. He waved his weapon silently, his young face revealing obvious tiredness and cold murderous intent. Xie Shu's right arm was torn and he had to switch to using his left hand. Luckily, his left hand's swordsmanship was as sharp as his right hand. After a wave of attacks stopped, another wave of attacks came. Xie Shu raised his hand and swung his sword to sweep an enemy off the city wall. Suddenly, another person appeared on the city wall, an assassin with a ferocious expression. Xie Shu! Enchanting exclaimed, throwing off an enemy and pouncing over. Xie Shu was only stunned for a moment, but he saw that person's ferocious face had an astonished expression as he fell backwards. 4 black shadows were like 4 sharp black arrows, shooting into the tens of thousands of troops at a shocking speed. Wherever it went, it was like a black tornado that swept through everything before it. Furthermore, it quickly split the army of tens of thousands of soldiers into pieces. Soon, the grey battlefield was torn apart by the black. What is that? Looking at the men in black flying under the city wall, they drew their bows and shot 3 arrows at the same time, as if they didn't even need to aim, accurately hitting 3 people who tried to climb up the city wall. Then, a few faster black tornadoes rolled by, and the ladder under the city wall turned into a pile of scrap in a very short time. Then, the riders on the horses left as if there was no one around. Enchanting looked at the scene under the city wall in shock and exclaimed. Xie Shu covered his painful wound and forced a smile. It's the reinforcement. Quick, shoot the arrows. Because the ladder was destroyed, the pressure on the city wall was greatly reduced. Xie Shu hurriedly ordered the soldiers on the city wall to shoot arrows to support the riders in black below. They stood on the city wall and naturally saw it clearly. There weren't many reinforcements, but their momentum and fighting power, as well as the momentum of the thousands of cavalry, made the enemy a bit confused. There were few cavalry in the south. Cavalry! Xie Shu looked at the black knights below. Even if these knights could fight against 100, it was not a long-term solution for them to be trapped in an army of tens of thousands. Xie Shu shook his head. No need. If we guard the city gate, they can kill their way out. The Black Cloud cavalry was invincible on the battlefield. Mo Jingli was watching the battle with his subordinates at the back of the enemy army. He didn't take this small Yonglin city seriously. This journey was too smooth. As long as he took down Yonglin, he could almost control half of the Dhu state. In fact, even Mo Jingli didn't expect it to be so smooth. He glanced sideways at the Yongju governor standing at the side. Coldness flashed in his eyes. Those who betrayed their master could also betray their second master. This person was still useful now, but in the future, swoosh swoosh. Several hidden weapons pierced through the air, shooting towards Mo Jingli, who was in the crowd. Mo Jingli alertly dodged to the side, and the guards by his side immediately surrounded him. There's an assassin. Protect the prince. A few figures appeared from all directions. However, they didn't pounce towards Mo Jingli, who was protected by layers of guards. One of the guards turned around and pounced towards the Yongju governor, who was hiding at the side. The Yongju governor was so scared that he wanted to scream. However, he couldn't hear his own voice at all. He only felt a chill in his chest. A dagger pierced through his heart. He raised his head in fear and looked into a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. A low voice sounded in his ears. By the orders of the imperial concubine, rebel, kill, retreat. He casually pulled out the dagger in the Yongju governor's chest. Blood immediately spurted out. An turned around and slashed the neck of the guard who pounced at him. He said to the few people who were still fighting. They quickly broke away from the entanglement and scattered. Furthermore, they quickly blended into the ranks of King Li's soldiers and gradually disappeared. Mo Jingli looked gloomily at the Yongju governor, who was already dead on the ground. The generals beside him also had a serious expression. They also had a hidden fear and worry. They didn't hear the assassin's words completely. However, the last sentence, rebel, kill, indeed, they heard it loud and clear. The Yongju governor was killed so cleanly in the midst of tens of thousands of soldiers under heavy protection. How could they not tremble in fear? Mo Jingli didn't have time to get angry. Soon, someone cried out, "What is that?" Everyone looked over. Black-clothed riders had appeared on the battlefield at some unknown time. The soldiers at the front were already showing signs of defeat after a few charges. Where did so many riders come from? These riders were extremely fast. They occasionally crossed each other. From afar, it was impossible to see how many people there were. They only felt that the entire battlefield was filled with black-clothed riders. Everywhere they went, there were corpses. However, the terrain outside Yonglin City was narrow. It was impossible to spread out all the soldiers and horses. For a moment, they couldn't do anything to them. Black Cloud Riders. Mo Jingli gritted his teeth. Black Cloud Riders. Everyone trembled again. The timid ones couldn't help but turn pale. Black Cloud Riders, the Ding Palace's most elite force. It could even be said that they were the Da Chu state's most elite army. They were personally controlled by the Ding Prince. Apart from the Ding Prince and the Ding Palace's mistress, who was acknowledged by the prince, no one else could command this army. The Black Cloud Riders appeared here, then. Prince Ding was definitely nearby. Impossible. Mo Jingli said coldly, that sickly Mo Xiaoyao definitely couldn't have gotten here so quickly. He had secretly left the capital. Even if Mo Xiaoyao received the news and immediately chased after him, with his sickly body, it would take at least a few days for him to get here. Even if he felt it, he still didn't have the strength to command the battle. Then, who is commanding this Black Cloud Riders right now? A general asked with a trembling voice. Mo Jingli snorted. He was sure that Mo Xiaoyao definitely wasn't in Yonglin. However, who was commanding this Black Cloud Riders? Feng Zhiyao? That wasn't right. Feng Zhiyao couldn't command the Black Cloud Riders. Prince, there are a large number of riders coming from the south. Mo Jingli was stunned. How many? Many, countless. The scouts were all killed when they got close. Everyone looked towards the south. Sure enough, they saw smoke and dust billowing from the other side of the forest. There were also galloping horse hooves that seemed to shake the ground. Without a few thousand horses, there definitely wouldn't be such an effect. Chapter 211. Prince, the signal to retreat sounded, and the enemy troops retreated like a tide. At the same time, the Yonglin city gates opened, and the black-clothed cavalry quickly rushed into the city, and the heavy city gates closed again. On the city walls, looking at the departing enemy troops, Yun Ting and Xie Shu looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. If these people did not feel it, they probably would not have been able to hold on. Yun Ting casually wiped away the blood on his sword, and returned the sword to its sheath, and asked curiously, Xie Shu, who is it that came to help us? Xie Shu sighed, and said, when you go back, don't brag that you grew up in the capital. You can't even see this, and spend all your time on collecting those rumors, right? He even knew that Prince Li was fooling around with his sister-in-law, but he still acted like he was muddle-headed. Yun Ting tilted his head and blinked, then suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked at Xie Shu in a daze. After a while, he stuttered, Xie Shu, it can't be the one I think it is, right? Xie Shu rolled his eyes at him. Other than that, who else can it be? Yun Ting finally screamed, and quickly ran down the city gate tower. Xie Shu helplessly shook his head, and also followed. The legendary Black Cloud Cavalry, he was also very curious about it, okay? On both sides of the wide street below the city walls, there was a dense mass of people and horses. But no matter if it was the people or the horses, they did not make a single sound. The entire street was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. As soon as Yun Ting walked down the gate tower, he felt a sharp killing intent and an oppressive aura coming at him from all directions. His originally overjoyed expression involuntarily disappeared as he stood up straight and looked at the person in front of him. The person at the front was also dressed in black, but he did not ride on a horse like the others. Instead, he stood there quietly while leading a black steed. Yun Ting could see that he was different. Compared to the cavalry on horseback, he was petite and kind, and did not have the stern and fierce aura of the cavalry. He even looked at Yun Ting with a faint smile in his eyes. However, Yun Ting knew that this did not mean that this person was weaker than others. On the contrary, this person should be the leader of these people. I am Captain Yun Ting of Shattering Snow Pass. Thank you for coming to my aid. I wonder, how should I address you? Yi Li looked indifferently at the young general who was clearly nervous and expectant. She couldn't help but find it funny. But his face was calm. Commandant Yun, is it convenient for us to talk somewhere else? Yun Ting was still in a daze. Xia Shu, who followed behind him, said, of course, this way please. I am Xia Shu, the captain of Shattered Snow Pass. Yi Li nodded and turned to the Black Cloud cavalry behind her. Rest here. Yes. The 2,000 Black Cloud cavalry got off their horses in unison. Their actions were so uniform that it was shocking. Yun Ting came back to his senses and said, everyone must be tired from the journey. Why don't we rest in the camp? Yi Li said somewhat helplessly, I'm afraid there won't be any time to rest. Presumably, Yonglin City also had a lot of injured soldiers that needed to be taken care of. But these war horses still need to be taken care of by the two of you. Xia Shu naturally understood. Fortunately, although there weren't many cavalries in Shattering Snow Pass, the fodder for 2,000 war horses could still be provided for some days. He nodded and said, don't worry, young master. I'll send someone to take care of it immediately. Young master, this way please. Yi Li nodded and followed Xia Shu to the military camp not far from the gate tower. Yun Ting was a little dizzy. He looked back at the black-clothed cavalries who either sat down or closed their eyes to rest or wiped their swords after sending the war horses away. Then he looked back at Yi Li who followed Xia Shu with a few black-clothed men. He shook his head and hurriedly chased after them. In the hall that looked a little shabby because of the temporary setup, Xia Shu stared at the black-clothed young man who sat in front of him leisurely and looked around the hall. He also saw the 4 black-clothed cavalries who stood beside him as his guards. Young master, can you say anything now? I haven't asked the origin of young master and the rest of you. Yi Li looked at the two of them and smiled. No wonder General Murong would send the two of you to guard Yonglin City. Commandant Yun is brave and valiant, and Commandant Xia is cautious. It's really a rare combination. Xia Shu smiled bitterly. If young master and the rest of you hadn't arrived today, I'm afraid that Xia Shu and Yun Ting could only apologize with death. He still stared at Yi Li. He wouldn't forget that the young man in front of him hadn't told him his identity. Yi Li was helpless. She raised her hand and pulled down the bun on her head, letting the black hair slide down her shoulder. She smiled faintly and said, I'm Ding's consort. Ding's consort. Yun Ting and Xia Shu looked at each other. Although the situation in front of them was unexpected, it seemed to be reasonable. Except for Prince Ding, only Ding's consort could mobilize so many Black Cloud cavalries. But how could Ding's consort, who was rumored to have disappeared, suddenly appear in Broken Snow Pass and even lead the Black Cloud cavalries to rescue Yonglin City? And, it was said that Ding's consort was the daughter of the minister of the imperial court, the granddaughter of Mr. Qingyun. She was a delicate lady from a noble family. How could she? Yun Ting felt even more dizzy. He stood aside and didn't say anything. He let Xia Shu, who was obviously calmer than him, handle everything. Xia Shu was also frightened. It took him a long time to come to his senses. He said, Why are you here? Yi Li smiled and said, I wasn't here at first. I heard the news that Broken Snow Pass was besieged. Fortunately, I made it in time. If you two don't believe my identity, is Miss Murong, the daughter of General Murong, still in Broken Snow Pass? Xia Shu's face changed slightly. He said awkwardly, It's not that I don't believe your identity. After all, the Black Cloud cavalries are the best evidence. It's just. Yi Li nodded. I understand what Commandant Xia means. Don't be nervous. Both of you, please sit. Xia Shu and Yun Ting looked at each other. They thanked each other and took their seats. Originally, they were happy that the Black Cloud cavalries came to their rescue. But now that they found out that the one leading the Black Cloud cavalries was Ding's consort, they didn't know what expression to use. Everyone knew that Prince Ding wasn't in a good position. If he wanted to mobilize the Black Cloud cavalries, he couldn't do it without Ding's consort. But if such a delicate and slender woman really had the ability to command such a strong army and lead them against hundreds of thousands of Prince Li's rebel army, the two didn't have much confidence in their hearts. This subordinate requests to see consort. An and an San's voice came from outside the door. Xia Shu and Yun Ting were stunned. They looked outside the door vigilantly. A few men wearing normal soldier uniforms walked in. Even though the uniforms of Da Chu state soldiers were similar, Xia Shu could still see the insignia on these people's uniforms. They were obviously Prince Li's soldiers. These people were obviously not let in by the soldiers guarding the city. "You've worked hard. How did it go?" An stepped forward and said, "Following consort's orders, we've already executed the Yongju governor. It's a pity that Prince Li has many subordinates and this subordinate was unable to bring back the Yongju governor's head." Asking for consort's forgiveness. Yi Li raised her hand. "It's fine. You did very well. Go and rest." Everyone left. Yun Ting said in shock, You killed the Yongju governor?" Chapter 212. Yun Ting, don't be rude, Xia Shu said in a deep voice. Xia Shu said in a deep voice. Since they could confirm that the woman in front of them was the imperial concubine, regardless of whether she had the ability to lead the Black Cloud cavalry and the Yonglin army, she was not someone they could be rude to. Although he was also shocked by what he heard just now. Yi Li nodded slightly and said, "The Yongju governor did not want to serve the country and surrendered to Prince Li. If we don't deal with him seriously, I'm afraid other officials will be persuaded by him and follow his example." Xia Shu nodded and said, "What Wang Fei said is right. If the Yongju governor did not betray Prince Li, Yonglin army would not be trapped today." Yun Ting looked at Xia Shu and then looked at Yi Li. He suddenly asked, "Princess, when will the reinforcements arrive?" Yi Li pondered for a moment and shook her head, "I don't know. I was in Nanjiao before. After hearing the news of shattered Snow Pass, I rushed back. But Yongju Army Commander Wu was ambushed at the Cloud River. I'm afraid there won't be any reinforcements in the next few days. It was good enough that the entire south of the Cloud River could protect themselves. There was no need to think about reinforcements. In Jiangbei, only Yongju was the closest to Yongju. If the Yongju army was ambushed, the other army would not come out without receiving the imperial edict. Soldiers. Yun Ting and Xia Shu were the commanders of the Yonglin army. They were not ordinary soldiers, so Yi Li had no intention to deceive them. If the commander could not see the situation clearly, there was no need to mention anything else. Damn it! Yun Ting cursed in a low voice. Even with the addition of the 2,000 Black Cloud cavalry, they had less than 20,000 men. Even if they were not afraid of death, if they could defend Yonglin army by fighting all of them, he would rather die on the battlefield. Xia Shu slowly took a breath and calmed himself down before asking, "In this case, Princess, please leave Yonglin army and return to the capital as soon as possible." "Leave?" Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked. Xia Shu smiled bitterly, "To tell you the truth, although we have made a military order in front of General Murong, we are not qualified. However, Yonglin, we can only do our best to defend for as long as we can. This one has heard of the grudge between Princess Consort and Prince Li. What if when the time comes? So please leave as soon as possible." Yi Li revealed a smile. "Commandant Xia, did you think that this consort came to Yonglin to stroll around here and then leave? Moreover, if I leave, even if I leave the Black Cloud cavalry to you, will you be able to command them?" Xia Shu looked at Yi Li guiltily. He did have this idea. He hoped that Princess Ding could leave the Black Cloud cavalry behind to help defend the city. However, Princess Ding was right. If even the past emperors could not touch the Black Cloud cavalry, then how could he, a mere military officer, command them? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a smile. "What's wrong? Did I embarrass you by defending the city with you?" This. Xia Shu was speechless. Yun Ting said straightforwardly, "Princess Consort, the battlefield is too dangerous. You have a noble status and you are a girl. How can we let you defend the city with us? Why don't you talk to the brothers of the Black Cloud Cavalry and stay behind to help us defend the city? This way, you will be safe and we will have more confidence in defending the city. Yi Li giggled and covered her mouth. Commandant Yun, I rode in by myself just now. I didn't sit in a sedan and let people carry me in, right? Yun Ting was stunned. Only now did he remember that in the chaos just now, there was indeed no one who was protecting anyone. So this girl who didn't even reach his shoulder was actually someone who had followed all the Black Cloud Cavalry and killed their way out of the army? Xie Shu coughed lightly and cupped his hands towards Yi Li. This one has been rude. General Murong is at Shattered Snow Pass. Why don't we ask Princess Consort to see General Murong first before making a plan? Yi Li frowned and thought for a moment. She nodded. That is good. The rebel army has suffered setbacks in the past 2 days. Right now, they have retreated. 20 Li Mo Jingli will not advance rashly before investigating clearly. Since I am here, it is not right if I don't see General Murong. Let's go to Shattered Snow Pass first. Yun Ting volunteered. I will send Princess Consort over. Xie Shu looked at Yun Ting with a faint smile. As if he understood what he was thinking, he smiled tolerantly. I will stay behind to guard Yonglin. Yi Li nodded. Then I will have to trouble Commandant Xie. I will leave the Black Cloud Cavalry to help Commandant Xie strengthen the city walls. Xie Shu was overjoyed. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud Cavalry was good at attacking, but at the same time, those who were good at attacking would know where the weakness of the defense was. It was every soldier's honor to be able to observe the Black Cloud Cavalry at a close distance. Hearing this, Yun Ting was in a dilemma. Was it better for Princess Ding to see General Murong, or was it better to stay behind to watch the Black Cloud Cavalry? Looking at Yi Li, who had stood up, Commandant Yun Ting clenched his fist in his heart. It was absolutely necessary to please Princess Ding first. If after this battle, he could ask Princess Ding to take him into the Black Cloud Cavalry. Even if he was a small soldier, he was willing. Shattered Snow Pass. Covered in blood, Murongshan walked into the tent with a majestic gait. As if they knew that Prince Li's rebel army was approaching, the Nanjiao people's attack became more and more intense. In the end, Murongshan personally led people out of the city and fought for a long time to kill them back. Now he could finally take a breath. Murongshan did not even have time to change his clothes before he hurried back to the tent to listen to the battle report of Yonglin City. General, this morning, Prince Li personally led 150,000 troops and horses and arrived at Yonglin City. Murongshan waved his hand and said, "Nonsense. There is only so much space outside Yonglin City. Where is he going to place his 150,000 troops?" One of his subordinates stood up and said, "I'm afraid that the 150,000 troops are prepared for our Shattered Snow Pass. Yesterday, Yun Ting and Xie Shu killed Prince Li's vanguard and killed the vanguard who opened the way. Today, those two brats will not have a good time." Murongshan nodded and said, "Yun Ting and Xie Shu fought well this time. General, why don't I take people to Yonglin City to have a look? I'm afraid that those two brats can't hold on today," a middle-aged deputy general said with some worry. Murongshan shook his head with a heavy expression. "The Nanjiao army will attack at any time. Besides, we can't spare more troops to support them." All the generals were silent. Transferring people from Shattered Snow Pass was equivalent to letting the Nanjiao people into Shattered Snow Pass. If they did not transfer people, the 20,000 people in Yonglin City would be eaten by Prince Li's army sooner or later. At that time, they would not be able to hold Shattered Snow Pass even if they surrounded it from both sides. And the sad thing was, they could not even break out of the encirclement because they were guarding Shattered Snow Pass, which was the gate of Daechu State. Unless all the soldiers in Shattered Snow Pass were killed, they would never let the foreigners take a step in. This was the belief that generations of guardians of Shattered Snow Pass had used their lives and blood to forge. Damn it! Prince Li actually colluded with the Nanjiao people. The bad-tempered generals could not help cursing. What could be more depressing than being stabbed in the back by your own people when you were fighting for your life in front of a bloody storm? How could the dignified prince of the royal family, the brother of the emperor, collude with foreigners? Chapter 213. General, the battle report of Yonglin City. Send it in. The cursing in the tent stopped abruptly. Everyone looked at the soldier who came in with the report seriously, for fear of hearing bad news from him. General, the rebel army of King Li attacked the city for 2 hours this morning. At noon, the rebel army was defeated. Lieutenant Xia asked the general to rest assured that as long as there is a soldier in Yonglin City, the rebel army will never cross the city. The soldier reported loudly. Great, these 2 boys are really good. Murongshen was overjoyed. In fact, he was a little nervous about sending Yunting and Xia Shu to Yonglin City before. After all, they were too young, but there was no one to send in Shattering Snow Pass. He didn't expect that these 2 boys could win 2 days in a row. After thinking for a while, Murongshen asked with some doubts, King Li's army of more than 100,000 has been exhausted. How did Yunting and Xia Shu defeat them? The soldier didn't hide it. We couldn't hold on at first, but suddenly many cavalrymen in black appeared out of nowhere and defeated the enemy. In addition, the governor of Yongju was also killed in King Li's army. Murongshen was stunned. He couldn't figure out the identity of these cavalrymen in black, but it was a good thing that the governor of Yongju was killed. Good. Go back and check the information of those cavalrymen. Send it to me as soon as possible. Yes. General, Lieutenant Yunting wants to see you. Yunting? Why is he here? Let him in. Murongshen frowned and waved his hand to order. Not long after, Yunting came in a hurry. As soon as he entered the door, he shouted to Murongshen, General, look who this is. Murongshen was about to reprimand Yunting for his impetuousness, but when he looked up, he couldn't say anything for a long time. Murongshen didn't like to socialize in the capital, and Yi Li didn't like to go out either. But Murongting and Yi Li were really good friends. Therefore, General Murong, who loved his daughter as much as his own life, had seen this famous Princess Ding a few times. Although the other party was dressed in black and was dressed as a man, Murongshen had a deep impression of her beautiful face and calm smile. Wang. Murongshen tried his best to swallow the rest of the word, only to hear Yi Li salute him with a smile. General Murong, how have you been since we parted in the capital? After all, Murongshen was a general who had been on the battlefield for half of his life. He quickly regained his composure and returned the greeting with a smile. Thank you for your concern. I would like to thank you for your help in resolving the crisis of Yonglin. The black-clad cavalryman saw the princess consort of Ding who suddenly appeared here. If Murongshen couldn't guess who saved Yonglin, he wouldn't be Murongshen who had fought with Mo Liufang. Although the generals in Shattering Snow Pass didn't know who the black-clad young man who came with Yunting who saved Yonglin was, they clearly sensed that General Murong knew this person, so they also relaxed their guard and looked at Yi Li curiously. Murongshen looked at the crowd, waved his hand to let them leave, and then invited Yi Li to sit down. Yi Li didn't stand on ceremony. After thanking him, she walked to one side and sat down. General, can Shattering Snow Pass be defended? Yi Li knew Murongshen's temper very well, and didn't want to waste time with him, so she asked directly. Murongshen looked deeply at Yi Li, sighed after a while, and said, I won't hide it from you, princess. If there weren't Prince Li's hundreds of thousands of troops behind me, Murongshen dares to guarantee that the people of Nanjiang would never step into Shattering Snow Pass. But once Yonglin City is breached, Shattering Snow Pass may not be able to defend for even half a day. There was no barrier between Shattering Snow Pass and Yonglin City. Once the rebel army passed Yonglin City, it was equal to leaving the defending army behind for the rebel army to attack. At that time, the defending army of Shattering Snow Pass would be wiped out without any effort from Nanjiao people. Yi Li naturally understood that Murongshen was telling the truth. She frowned and said, in your opinion, how long will it take for the reinforcements to arrive? Murongshen smiled bitterly, if at most 2 days, the reinforcements will arrive. But now, within 10 days, we won't even see half a shadow of the reinforcements. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. So you mean that Shattering Snow Pass can't be defended? Murongshen gritted his teeth and said, we have to defend even if we can't. As long as Murongshen is still alive, Nanjiao people won't be able to pass through Shattering Snow Pass. Yi Li was silent for a moment, and then raised her head and asked, how long do you think we can defend? Murongshen said in a low voice, that depends on how long Yonglin can last. How many Black Cloud cavalry did Princess bring this time? Yi Li sighed, this time it's purely a coincidence. The Black Cloud cavalry only has 2,000 people. General, if Shattering Snow Pass can't be defended, can we retreat to Yunlan River? Murongshen waved his hand and said firmly, others can retreat, but Murongshen can't. Since His Majesty has sent Murongshen to guard Shattering Snow Pass, I can only live and die with Shattering Snow Pass. Yi Li frowned and said, then, have you thought about what will happen if Nanjiang people take advantage of the situation and march north after Shattering Snow Pass is broken? The 20,000 defending troops of Yongju have been wiped out at Yunlan River. At this time, not only is Yongju in danger, Yongju also has no troops to guard it. Murongshen laughed and said proudly, don't worry, Princess. After receiving the news of Commander Wu's death, I thought of this point. So I've ordered people to monitor Henghui Bridge at Yunlan River day and night. If the reinforcements arrive first, then it's fine. But once Shattering Snow Pass is broken and the reinforcements haven't arrived, the people left there will destroy the bridge at all costs. No matter if Nanjiao people want to rebuild the bridge, cross the river by boat, or take a detour, the journey will be delayed for at least half a month. At that time the reinforcements of the imperial court should arrive. But Princess, thank you for your help this time. Please leave Yongju as soon as possible for your safety. Yi Li stood up and saluted Murongshen with admiration. Since General has made up his mind, then, how about leaving Yonglin City to me? Princess. Murongshen looked at her in surprise. Yi Li smiled and said, since I'm the princess of Ding country, how can I leave Yongju when it's in danger? Yi Li is also willing to live and die with Yonglin City, so as to live up to the name of Ding country. Isn't that right? Murongshen was silent for a long time before he finally said, no wonder. No wonder the Black Cloud cavalry would listen to Princess Ding's command. She was indeed not an ordinary lady. Everyone thought that only Prince Ding and Princess Ding could command the Black Cloud cavalry. But they didn't know that even among the past Princess Ding, there were only 2 or 3 people who could really command the Black Cloud cavalry. Not to mention the former Princess Ding, even Prince Ding's birth mother, the princess who was deeply in love with Prince Regent Mo Liufang, also never had the right to command the Black Cloud cavalry. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and waited for Murongshen's words. Murongshen just shook his head and didn't say anything. He just looked up at Yi Li and said, so, Yonglin City will be entrusted to Princess. I can't help Princess with anything, so I can only send another 10,000 people to Princess. These 10,000 people were supposed to be sent to reinforce Yunting and Xia Shu when they couldn't hold on anymore. It was also the only people he could send. Chapter 214. Yi Li nodded, thank you for your trust, General. After receiving Murongshen's commander's seal, Yi Li didn't delay any longer. She got up and prepared to return to Yonglin City. Murongshen was a veteran on the battlefield. If it weren't for the sudden attack and the great disparity in strength, they wouldn't be so stretched. Naturally, Yi Li didn't need to meddle in the defense of Shattered Snow Pass. When she got out of the military camp, she saw Murong-Ting walking towards her with a sword. Hey! Murong-Ting was in a hurry to find her father, but she stopped when she heard a familiar voice. She stared at the familiar yet strange person in front of her for a long time before she came to herself and pointed at her. You, how dare you? Murongshen came out behind her and glared at Murong-Ting. How can you be so rude to Child Shu? Child Shu? Murong-Ting screamed. Yi Li smiled and raised her eyebrows at Murong-Ting. I'm Shu Qingliu. Nice to meet you, Miss Murong. Murong-Ting blushed and quickly hid behind Murongshen. She glared at Yi Li with resentment. Yi Li couldn't be blamed for suddenly becoming thin-skinned. She could only blame the man she was with for looking too good. Even if he didn't put on makeup to change his appearance, he still looked like a handsome and slightly childish young man. He didn't have the slightest bit of a girl's delicate appearance. Murong-Ting had always boasted of her heroic character, but she had to admit that even if she wore men's clothes, she wouldn't look more like a boy than the person in front of her. Even though she knew that Yi Li was a real woman, Ting couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when she saw a handsome young man with a naive and childish look in her heart. Looking at Ting's rare blush, Yi Li couldn't help but smile at her. The young man in the sun was handsome and elegant. His black clothes couldn't hide his clean and clear childishness. Ting could only stare at him more widely and scold him in her heart, Ivildor. General, I'll leave first. Yi Li didn't want to provoke Ting anymore. She turned around and said goodbye to Murongchen. Murongchen nodded and said cautiously, in that case, please take care of Yonglin City. I won't let you down. Yi Li smiled. Ting looked at Yi Li and rolled her eyes. Father, why is young Master Shu going to Yonglin? Murongchen frowned and said, young Master Shu is going to help Ting and Xia Shu defend the city. Ting quickly said, I want to go too. Stop fooling around. Young Master Shu is going to do something serious. Why are you following him? Ting was so angry that she stomped her feet. Previously, he said that she was a girl and could not go to the battlefield. Now, wasn't he asking Li Li to go to the battlefield? I don't care. I also want to help defend the city. I'm Daddy's daughter, not a useless person who only knows how to eat for free in the barrack. Ah! Young Master Shu, can you take me with you? Being so excited, Ting forgot that Yi Li was still wearing men's clothes. She directly jumped on him and shook his sleeves, which attracted the attention of the soldiers passing by. Yi Li coughed softly, pulled her hands away and said with a smile, men and women are different. Ting just noticed the strange eyes of the soldiers passing by. She quickly let go of her hands and made a face at Yi Li. She turned back and pulled her father to act like a spoiled child. Father, let Ting go. I will never make trouble for others. Murongchen was pestered by her and had no choice but to look at Yi Li. Yi Li lowered her head and said with a smile, if you don't worry, General, let Murong go with me. Murongchen sighed. Now the situation was critical. There was not much difference between staying in Shattered Snow Pass and going to Yonglin City. Even if she stayed in Shattered Snow Pass, he could not take care of her when the battle really started. Well, I'll have to trouble young Master Shu to take care of this girl. If she dares to be willful and mischievous, young Master Shu can punish her according to military law. You don't have to be merciful. Thank you, Father. Ting was overjoyed. She did not care about the military law that her father said later. At least this meant that her father was willing to treat her as a soldier and not as an insensible little girl, right? Thank you, Father. Ting was overjoyed. She did not care about the military law that her father said later. At least this meant that her father was willing to treat her as a soldier and not as an insensible little girl, right? After bidding farewell to Murongchen, Yi Li and the others stopped in front of Shattered Snow Pass for less than 2 hours and then started to go back. Ting rode on the back of the horse and looked at Yi Li's horse and the few Black Cloud cavalry soldiers behind her with envy. Only a few people had such an imposing manner. If the whole Black Cloud cavalry was in front of her, what a magnificent scene it would be. Just thinking about it made her blood boil. Young Master Shu, why did you come to Shattered Snow Pass? My father is really not worried about you. No matter what I said, he would not let me go to the battlefield. But when you came, he was actually willing to hand over the defense of Yonglin to you. Thinking of this, Ting could not help but feel a little sour in her heart. Did her father really think that she was very useless, so he was unwilling to let her go to the battlefield? Yi Li smiled and said, I went to the southern border to settle some matters and coincidentally met you. Prince is actually willing to let you go to the southern border alone to settle some matters. Prince is really a good person. Not like my father, who always nags me that when a girl gets married, she has to stay at home obediently to do the housework and be virtuous. I don't want to stay at home obediently. Ting complained softly in dissatisfaction. Her last sentence was so soft that it was almost like a whisper. However, everyone present had excellent hearing. Naturally, they all heard it clearly. Ting smiled and said, Miss Murong, if you say that, young Master Lung will cry. Ting bared her teeth and snorted at Ting. Then she patted her horse and ran to the front. Yi Li smiled and followed her. She smiled and said, General Murong also dotes on you and is afraid that you will be in danger. I know, but my father only has one daughter. I also want my father to be proud of me. Also, I am not a child, I will not act impulsively. My father does not allow me to go to the battlefield. No matter how anxious I am, I will not secretly go behind his back. Yi Li nodded. Although Murong Ting was occasionally willful, she knew her limits and would not let others really worry about her. When they returned to Yonglin City, Xia Shu had already followed several commanders of Black Cloud Cavalry to reinforce the defense of Yonglin City. Yun Ting had long been itching to do so. When he returned to the city, he told Yi Li that he did not have time to entertain her, the princess consort of Dingwa, and he also ran around. Murong Ting had no interest in Yi Li sitting in the study and reading a lot of files and maps. She turned her eyes and ran to find some young and strong men and clever women in the city, preparing to organize them. When the war came, although they could not go to the battlefield, it was not a problem for them to help take care of the wounded soldiers and deal with the logistics. Yi Li also agreed with her idea. Murong Ting, who had been restrained by Murongshan for a long time, was even happier. She went with a smile. Yi Li sat in the specially vacated study, looking at the map in front of her and frowning. She was obviously not a genius, at least not in commanding a large-scale battle. As a special soldier in her previous life, she was better at local small group battles and attacking the enemy's key points. Now, in the situation where they did not have the advantage of time or even the geographical advantage, they had to face the siege of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses. Let alone turning defeat into victory, they would be happy if they could successfully defend until the reinforcements arrived. The shattered snow pass, which had not been broken by foreigners for hundreds of years, obviously gave Yonglin City a very safe feeling. Therefore, the defensive ability of the city wall of Yonglin City was not good at all, let alone the internal defense. Who would have thought that the soldiers stationed in the shattered snow pass would one day have to face the attack from Dachu State? Chapter 215. Greetings to Princess Consort. Xia Shu, Yun Ting and the others came together. They stood at the door and bowed to Yi Li. Yi Li waved to everyone without turning her head and said, "Come in, how is it?" Yun Ting, who had the most straightforward personality, smiled and said, "Thanks to the help of the Black Cloud Cavalry brothers, we have strengthened the city's defenses." The Black Cloud Cavalry commander who came together shook his head and said, "Yonglin City's foundation is too weak. Even if we strengthen it, it won't last long. Yesterday's attack could only be considered as a test. When the next attack starts, it won't be so easy to stop." Yi Li raised her head and frowned slightly, saying, "The rebel army probably won't attack in these 2 days, but we still have to be on guard. You all have to be careful. Yesterday, they deliberately deceived Mo Jingli. Before Mo Jingli figured out how many people they had, Mo Jingli wouldn't attack easily. But the trick wouldn't last long. Once Mo Jingli found out the truth, they would only be welcomed with a stronger attack. Yun Ting, Xia Shu, you guys are familiar with the surroundings. Come and look at this map." Yun Ting and Xia Shu went forward curiously. A large map was unfolded on the desk in front of Yi Li. On the top, there was a line of beautiful words written on it, Yonglin Topography Map. Yun Ting and Xia Shu quickly discovered that this map didn't just include Yonglin City. It included almost all the topography of Yonglin City and Fujin within a 100-li radius. It also included Shattered Snow Pass and parts of Nanjiang. Most importantly, this map was clearly newly drawn. Yun Ting asked in confusion, "Does Princess Consort need a map? We still have a few maps here. Shattered Snow Pass also has a map of Yongju." Yi Li shook her head. Neither she nor the Black Cloud Cavalry were familiar with Yongju. And it was a big taboo to not be familiar with the terrain in war. Thus, when she was still in the southern border, she had already sent a message to the Black Cloud Cavalry to collect information on the terrain near Yonglin. It was only until last night that she was able to draw them out with reference to the original map. However, she didn't check most of the areas herself, which made the map more uncertain. Therefore, she wanted Yun Ting and Xia Shu, who were familiar with the local area, to have a look. Xie Shu stared at the drawing seriously for a long time, and his eyes were filled with fanaticism. He praised softly, "Is this drawn by the princess herself?" Yi Li rubbed her forehead and said, "Although I believe in the soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry, I didn't see it for myself. Look at this map and see if there is anything wrong with it." Xie Shu looked at it for a long time, then pointed to a place marked with a river on the map and said, "Here, if this river is closer to this mountain, there will probably be no problem." Yi Li picked up the pen again and asked, "What is the distance between this river and this mountain?" Xie Shu lowered his head and silently calculated, "About 3 miles." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. The difference was indeed a bit far. For something like a map, the slightest mistake was the difference of 1,000 miles. She picked up the pen and started to edit the drawing. Xie Shu was full of praise as he watched. He admired this princess consort from the bottom of his heart. Other things aside, something like a map, even if someone had personally walked through all the places, they might not be able to draw it. Furthermore, Princess Ding could draw it almost exactly from hearing about it. This map was at least 10 times clearer and more detailed than the one they had now. What did war rely on? Other than the art of war, wasn't it the right time and the right place? However, not everyone who led an army had the opportunity to explore all the places they were going to fight. Basically, with this map, they could see everything within 100 miles of Yonglin clearly. "Princess, are we just going to wait for the rebel army to attack the city?" Yun Ting asked impatiently. Yi Li smiled and said, "What was your original plan?" Yun Ting was a bit embarrassed. Originally, they could only wait for the rebel army to attack the city. It wasn't that they were willing to do so, but they were limited by their military strength. However, didn't they have 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry now? The Black Cloud Cavalry wasn't good at defending, but attacking, right? Of course, he didn't like defending either. Yonglin is surrounded by mountains and forests. The cavalry's abilities are greatly restricted. Xie Shu frowned and said. It was the first time in his life that he saw the mountains and forests on the map and felt annoyed. If it was a flat land, the Black Cloud Cavalry wouldn't be able to do this much. However, he also knew that if it was a flat land and the rebel army all attacked the city, they wouldn't be able to pass. The Black Cloud Cavalry commander sneered and said, although the Black Cloud Cavalry is called cavalry, they aren't only good at riding and archery. The cavalry was mainly used to deal with the northern tribes. However, the horses of the Da Chu state couldn't compare to the horses of the northern tribes. Although the Black Cloud Cavalry were all elites, if they wanted to fight with the northern tribes' cavalry, it would definitely not be good for either side. Xie Shu looked at the arrogant Black Cloud Cavalry commander and the silent and San and said hesitantly, "Can we attack first and mess up their plans?" Yi Li raised his eyebrows, "Tell me about it." Xie Shu picked up the charcoal pencil and marked on the map while saying, "The rebel army has set up camp 20 miles away from Yonglin. If we sneak attack with our cavalry, we should be able to catch them off guard." An said, "The cavalry's movements are too big. If we want speed, we will be discovered before we even get close to the camp. Also, using 2,000 to sneak attack a camp of over 100,000? If they were truly caught in a huge battle, the Black Cloud Cavalry might not be able to escape unscathed." Xie Shu shook his head and said, "We don't need to sneak attack their camp. The terrain of Yonglin means that they definitely won't be able to station all of their troops in one place. If the rebel army camp is here, then there will definitely be some troops stationed here and here to form a horn and protect the camp. There shouldn't be more than 10,000 troops stationed in these two places. Perhaps, we can create some chaos." Qin Feng. Yi Li raised his eyebrows and asked the Black Cloud Cavalry commander. Qin Feng said with a frown, "If it really is like this, then we can cut off the left wing's path to the camp and completely wipe out this group of people. Even if we can't, this mountain path isn't too wide and the enemy's reinforcements won't come too quickly. We will have time to retreat. Only this way, the enemy might suspect that the main force of the Black Cloud Cavalry isn't even in Yongju." Yi Li blinked his eyes and asked with a smile, "What if the left and right wings are wiped out?" Everyone's eyes fell on Yi Li. Wiping out one side was already hard enough. How was it possible to wipe out both sides? And San, Quickly gather all the information on Mo Jingli's camp. Yi Li ordered. An and an San nodded and left the study. For 2 consecutive days, because he didn't receive any news from the Black Cloud Cavalry, Mo Jingli could only bide his time. Every time he saw the few Black Cloud Cavalry on Yonglin City, Mo Jingli would always feel suspicious. In reality, there weren't many Black Cloud Cavalry in Yongju, and Mo Xiaoyao wasn't even in Yongju. However, right when he wanted to make the decision to attack, he felt that this might be Mo Xiaoyao's plan to lure him into a trap. Mo Xiaoyao had always been crafty, so he couldn't help but be on guard. That was why, even though Nanzhao had already sent people to urge him to attack, he could only bring over 100,000 troops to face off in front of this small Yonglin city. Chapter 216. Prince, Nanzhao has urged us many times. Are we attacking Yonglin tomorrow? In the tent, a middle-aged military man asked. Mo Jingli frowned. What's the hurry? If they're in such a hurry, why don't they attack Shattering Snow Pass themselves? They've fought for so many days and they haven't even scratched Murongshan's skin. The military advisor shook his head with a helpless smile. The walls of Shattering Snow Pass are strong and hard to break since ancient times. It's reasonable that they can't take it. Mo Jingli was a little hesitant. He frowned and looked at the military counselor, asking, is it really useful to let the Nanzhao people in? The military counselor was slightly startled and looked at him in confusion. Your Highness, what do you mean? Mo Jingli snorted softly. We didn't need the Nanzhao people to spend any effort to sweep Yongju. Once they enter Shattering Snow Pass, I'm afraid, it's easier to invite them in than to send them away. Although the Nanzhao people were cooperating with him now, he knew that they weren't so honest. Once the legend of Shattering Snow Pass was destroyed, these people would challenge Shattering Snow Pass more frequently in the future and invade Da Chu State's territory. Prince, there's no turning back. The military advisor advised. Once we break the agreement, the Nanzhao people will retreat immediately. Then Murongshan will turn around to deal with us. When the imperial court's reinforcements arrive, the consequences will be unimaginable. So, Prince, it's better to end the battle quickly. Mo Jingli nodded. How could he not understand this? Why do you think the Black Cloud Cavalry came so quickly? The military advisor said awkwardly, Prince Ding has always been farsighted. In these 2 days, we haven't found any trace of the Black Cloud Cavalry. I'm afraid that Prince Ding planted a hidden chess piece here earlier. Thinking of this, the military advisor couldn't help but wring his hands. If it weren't for the Black Cloud Cavalry, Yonglin City would have been theirs. Perhaps even Shattering Snow Pass would have been broken. You're saying that Mo Xiaoyao predicted that there would be a war in Nanjiang? Mo Jingli asked with an ugly expression. The military advisor did not dare to admit it and only said, perhaps it was left behind by Prince Ding to guard against Nanzhao. After all, Prince Ding fought very fiercely in Nanjiang back then. If the imperial family had not been worried that the young general of the Prince Ding mansion was too famous at that time and that his military exploits were too great, they would have retreated. The present Nanzhao probably no longer existed. Nanzhao's hatred of Prince Ding went without saying. Prince Ding probably also viewed the resurgent Nanzhao as a thorn in his side. Mo Jingli curled his lips in disdain. Mo Xiaoyao claims to be a godly strategist, yet he still hasn't been able to conquer Nanjiang even after fighting for a year. I swept through Yongju in less than half a month. In at most half a year, we will be able to conquer the entire south of the Cloud Mist River. Prince is wise, military counselor said with a smile as he wiped his sweat without a trace. The fact that everything went so smoothly this time was definitely because the heavens were helping them. Ever since Murongshan guarded Broken Snow Pass, the emperor had used all kinds of methods to reduce the military strength of Yongju. The governor of Yongju spared no effort to find trouble for Murongshan. That was why Yongzhou's defense was empty. And this time, they had attacked unexpectedly, which was why their journey had been so smooth. In the future, when the imperial court reacted, it would not be so smooth. However, Prince was right. As long as they destroyed Murongshan in Broken Snow Pass, the south of the Cloud Mist River would indeed be in their pocket. Reporting to Prince, the Western Army was attacked. The soldier outside the tent hurriedly reported in a loud voice. Mo Jingli was startled. He suddenly got up and walked out of the tent to look into the distance. Sure enough, he saw a sea of fire in the west. Bastard! How could Yonglin City still have the military strength to launch a sneak attack? Military counselor followed behind him. When he saw the situation in the west, he was also startled. He quickly reminded, Prince. Mo Jingli said coldly, send reinforcement. Prince, look over there. The generals who hurried over screamed. At the same time, the camp in the east was also lit up. One of them said in horror, the east camp was also attacked. Military counselor's eyes flashed. He said in a low voice, Prince, Yonglin City doesn't have many soldiers and horses. If we want to attack the east and west camps at the same time, the city must be empty. If we take the opportunity to attack the city now. Mo Jingli suddenly turned back and stared at him. Do you think the two guys in Yonglin City have the guts to attack Yonglin City at night? He was not familiar with Yun Ting and Xia Shu, but they were not strangers either. It was said that they were the two youngest captains under Murong Shun. Two captains in their early 20s, even if they were given the courage, they would not dare to leave Yonglin City alone and take the risk. What was more, as long as one was not an idiot, he knew that even if the night attack succeeded, it was impossible to defeat hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Instead, it would exhaust the defense forces of Yonglin City. Prince means. Military counselor frowned. Send spies to investigate. General Zhong, General Li, reinforce the east and west camps. Yes, Prince. On a mountain peak not far from Prince Li's camp, Yi Li lowered her head and looked at the smoke and fire at the foot of the mountain with satisfaction. Xia Shu, and An San followed Yi Li together and looked at the scene at the foot of the mountain. The reinforcements are coming. Xia Shu pointed at a group of people on the road at the foot of the mountain and quickly moved in the direction of the west camp. Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and smiled. The west camp is about to end, right? Let someone lead them around a few times. Xia Shu smiled and said, of course, if we talk about the terrain, the locals who have been stationed here all year round are more familiar with it. I'm afraid that the east camp won't be able to hold on for much longer. Yi Li said, let them deal with the people there by themselves. Let the Shadow Guard prepare. I don't want Mo Jingli to send reinforcements again. If they ate too much, they would be choked to death. And San smiled and said, Princess, don't worry. The Shadow Guard can't fight, but they can definitely make trouble. The rebels would never have thought that their own people would come out from behind them. If they were attacked from behind in the dark, they would be prepared to fight to the death. Thanks to Prince Li, they didn't have time to change their appearance. The rebels not only had weapons but also had clothes similar to the Yonglin army. As for whether they could see the emblem of Prince Li's fief in the dark valley, it would depend on their luck. Yi Li nodded with satisfaction. Let's go and have a look. The four of them got on the horses that were parked not far away and quietly ran to another mountain in the dark night. It could be foreseen that there would be a more exciting battle there. No one could avoid this night. The battle didn't stop until the sky was getting brighter. As a result, Mo Jingli's gloomy face became even darker. The east camp and the west camp, together with the reinforcements sent out, were close to 30,000 people. Nearly 70 to 80% of them were killed or injured. And the other side left less than 3,000 corpses. As for the valley behind the east camp, it was almost completely filled with his own people. If he still couldn't guess what happened, he would be an idiot. In one night, they lost more than 20,000 soldiers. The commanders of the east and west camps and the two generals who were sent as reinforcements also died. This was a shocking blow to the originally high morale of Prince Li's army. Unknowingly, the news that Prince Ding and his Black Cloud cavalry were in Yonglin City secretly spread in the Li army. Almost all the soldiers couldn't help but panic. Prince Ding's residence and the Black Cloud cavalry definitely had an unshakable deterrent force in the hearts of every soldier. At this time, Yonglin City was indeed full of joy. The great victory this time made Yun Ting walk with the wind. Chapter 217. Don't be happy too early. When Mo Jingli figures out the truth, I'm afraid no one will be able to stop his army. Yi Li said helplessly. Yun Ting said excitedly, why don't we sneak attack a few more times? Xia Shu rolled her eyes at him. Do you think that Prince Li's subordinates are all idiots? After being sneak attacked once, they will let you succeed again. Maybe they are waiting for you to walk right into their trap. Yi Li nodded and said, Xia Shu is right. This time, we are indeed taking a risk. If Mo Jingli reacts and directly attacks Yonglin, then even if we can kill 20 to 30,000 rebels, it will be useless. Yun Ting also gradually recovered from his excitement, biting his fingers anxiously. Then what should we do? Damn it, when will the imperial court's reinforcements arrive? Princess. And San came in with a letter. Yi Li nodded and said to the two, you can go do your work first. Yun Ting and Xia Shu respectfully left. Yi Li took the letter from Ansan and opened it. At first, she was happy, but soon her face sank. Ansan looked strangely at Yi Li's change in expression. She didn't know what was written in the letter to make the usually calm princess consort act so strangely. After a while, Yi Li slapped the letter on the table and said, pass down the order, from today onwards, the entire army will be on alert. Princess consort, what's wrong? Yi Li said, Mo Jingli is very likely to attack Yonglin within these 2 days. Ansan didn't understand. According to their predictions, the rebel army shouldn't move at all in these few days. Yi Li looked at the letter on the table and said, the reinforcements will arrive at Yunlan River within 3 days. Not long after, Mo Jingli will also receive this news. If he doesn't attack Yonglin at this time, once the reinforcements arrive, he will have no chance. Ansan nodded, so, as long as we can hold on for these 3 days. I'm just afraid that these 3 days won't be easy. In King Li's army, Mo Jingli stared at the secret letter in his hand as if he wanted to bore a hole through it. After a while, he angrily said, Good Black Cloud Cavalry. I want to know which expert is in Yonglin City. It was written clearly in the secret letter that Mo Xiaoyao went to the palace to see Mo Jingqi 10 days ago. Even if he had left the capital at that time, he couldn't have arrived in Yongju in such a short time. Therefore, the one blocking his path in the past few days was definitely not that cripple Mo Xiaoyao. As for the Black Cloud Cavalry, other than the 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry in Yonglin City, they had searched the entire Yongju and did not find a single trace of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Prince, now. The military advisor's expression was grave. The reinforcements are coming so quickly. They will cross the Cloud River in at most 3 days. Prince, please make a decision as soon as possible. Should they withdraw the army to attack the east, or continue to attack the west to break through Shattered Snow Pass and join up with the Nanzhao army? Attack the city at all cost. The battle began again. This time, it was even more intense than a few days ago. Mo Jingli was not stingy as he sent out his most elite troops to attack the city. Although Yonglin City's defense had been improved with the help of the Black Cloud Cavalry, this kind of unrelenting and crazy attack still caused the soldiers defending the city to be extremely tired and suffer heavy casualties. After an entire day, the rebel army gradually retreated at night. However, they were still facing off against Yonglin City less than 5 li away. After a day, nearly half of Yonglin City's defenders had died. Even at night, they could not rest peacefully. They still had to guard against the rebel army's sneak attack. Yi Li looked at the situation in front of her and frowned. She waved her hand to have the Black Cloud Cavalry guard the city tower at night so that the soldiers defending the city could rest for a while. Li, can we defend Yonglin City? In the middle of the night, Mu Rongting stood on the city tower and looked down. In the distance, the rebel army's camp was dark and dense. She could not help but feel grave. Yi Li looked at her and said with a smile, "Why are you scared?" Mu Rongting pursed her lips and said with dissatisfaction, "Who's scared? It's just that. I have never seen so many dead people. In the past, father always said that I was childish. Only now do I know that I really am. I always thought that after staying at the border with father for a few years, I knew more than others. Actually, I have never seen a battlefield." Yi Li comforted her softly, "You've done very well." Mu Rongting was also very busy today. She brought the city's doctors and strong laborers to help the military doctors treat the injured soldiers. She also helped to transport food and arrows. Her entire person was haggard. General Mu Rong will definitely be proud of you. Mu Rongting said with an embarrassed smile, I didn't do anything. Li Li is the most powerful. If Li Li was my father's daughter, my father would definitely be so happy that he would wake up laughing in his dreams. Yi Li said with a smile, why don't we go back and ask if General Mu Rong is willing to let me switch with you? I don't want to. Father loves me the most. Yi Li laughed softly and said in a low voice, don't worry, we will all be fine. Mu Rongting was stunned. She sighed and said, I'm not afraid. If the rebel army really attacks, this lady will kill one if one comes. If two come, this lady will kill two. Seeing Mu Rongting pretend to be brave, Yi Li couldn't help but laugh. She sighed and raised her head to look at the crescent moon in the sky. A trace of worry gradually covered her beautiful face. In the corner of the city gate tower, Xia Shu and Yun Ting stood side by side. Their eyes landed on the slender figure in the distance. Yi Li was dressed in a moon-white male outfit. She didn't have a hairpin in her hair. Instead, she used a moon-white ribbon to casually tie it up. Under the moonlight, her sparkling face was covered in a layer of faint silver light. It seemed to be a trace of pure melancholy. Her aura that was as quiet as a lotus and elegant as an orchid made the young girl in red clothes beside her lose her splendor. If I can survive this time, I will definitely join the Black Cloud Cavalry, Yun Ting said firmly. Joining the Black Cloud Cavalry had always been his wish. It was just that he was even more determined now. If we can't defend tomorrow, you can escort the princess consort and leave first. Head towards the north. After passing the Cloud Mist River, you should be able to meet the reinforcements soon. Xia Shu said faintly. Yun Ting glared at him and said, am I someone who would run away before the battle? Xia Shu faintly swept a glance over him. You don't know the relationship between the princess consort and King Li? What will happen if she falls into King Li's hands? Yun Ting stilled. He couldn't help but look at the woman standing in the wind. He scratched his head in annoyance and said, I don't have the ability to escort the princess consort away. You should go. You are better at persuading people. The princess consort doesn't look like she would abandon Yonglin City and leave by herself. Speaking of which, I really haven't seen such a princess consort before. Xia Shu nodded in agreement. Even though they had only known each other for a few days, this Princess Ding who was younger than them had completely subverted their understanding of the title of princess consort. She looked weak on the outside, but her heart was stronger than men. There was also his astonishing intellect, his sharp decisiveness as a general, and his agility that was greater than many other generals. Many times, Xia Shu felt that the woman wasn't a pampered princess consort, but a soldier who had experienced hundreds of battles. Say, if we both survive and I ask the princess consort to accept me into the Black Cloud Cavalry, will the princess consort agree? Don't think about problems that can't be solved first. This had always been Yun Ting's habit. Tilting his head, Yun Ting began to imagine a beautiful future. Chapter 218. Xia Shu thought for a bit and smiled faintly. Maybe you can ask Princess Ding if the Black Cloud Cavalry is still accepting people. Yun Ting's eyes lit up as he looked at the moon-white figure who was talking to Mu Rongting not far away. Xia Shu shook his head helplessly and turned to walk down the city tower as he said, go back and rest, don't forget that there is still a fierce battle tomorrow. Yun Ting nodded indifferently, still hesitating whether or not he should ask Princess Ding. After all, not everyone had the chance to meet the master of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Looking at the gentle figure under the moonlight, Yun Ting turned and walked down the city tower. If he could survive tomorrow, he would beg Princess Ding to accept him into the Black Cloud Cavalry. The rebel army was clearly becoming impatient compared to the slow and leisurely pace of the past few days. They had already started attacking the city before the sun rose, and as the sky grew brighter, the attacks became more and more fierce. If it wasn't for the fact that Yonglin City couldn't fit so many people, Mo Jingli would definitely want to bring all of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers to besiege this small city. To defend the city, The 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry were definitely not much more useful than the 2,000 border city guards. By noon, the remaining soldiers in Yonglin City were already exhausted. The city gate was also on the verge of collapsing under the constant attacks of the rebel army. Wang! Young Master Shu, we can't hold on any longer, you guys should leave first. Xie Shu dragged his body covered in blood and stood in front of Yi Li, and the brothers of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Defending the city is our job, it's all thanks to you guys that we were able to defend for so many days. Leave. Yi Li raised his eyebrows, where can we go now? There are hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city. Black Cloud Cavalry's 2,000 men didn't suffer any casualties, they are just trapped in the city. As long as we leave the city, we will definitely be able to kill our way out. Xie Shu said. Yi Li pointed at the people behind him and said, ask them if they want to leave or not. Behind Yi Li was the stern-looking Black Cloud Cavalry commander Qin Feng and an and an San. Qin Feng said solemnly, the Black Cloud Cavalry exists to protect the Dhu state. If we leave behind the city and the soldiers guarding the city, we brothers can only apologize in front of the Black Cloud Cavalry soldiers when we return. And San looked at Xie Shu with a smile and said, we are the Shadow Guard. Wherever the master is, we will be there. Xie Shu stared at the person in front of him and felt his eyes were dry and stinging. He gritted his teeth and said, it's not worth it. Let Yonglin City bury a Princess Ding and 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. Such a price. And San patted Xie Shu's shoulder and said with a smile, if Yonglin City is really breached, we will risk our lives to protect you and kill our way out. At that time, we will be able to break out of the encirclement. What was the meaning of abandoning the city and fleeing now? Wouldn't it be better to abandon the city a few days earlier and save so many people from dying? Xie Shu was stunned. He slapped An San's hand away and turned to leave, do whatever you want. An San shrugged and said helplessly to the people behind him, he seems to be shy. An patted his third brother helplessly. Was he crazy? They were on the battlefield right now, okay? Seeing the city gate begin to break under the heavy impact, Yi Li sighed helplessly. In the end, they couldn't hold on until the reinforcements arrived. Black Cloud Cavalry, get ready. Yes. The city gate tower was handed over to the few remaining defenders. Below the city gate tower, 2,000 Black Cloud Cavalry were ready. They were like an arrow ready to shoot at any time. Yi Li turned back and nodded to Xie Shu and Yun Ting who were standing on the city gate tower. With a wave of her hand, the city gate fell to the ground. The moment the rebel army outside the city had no time to rush in, the Black Cavalry rushed out like a gust of wind. Everywhere they went, blood soared. Prince, they are here. Black Cloud Cavalry. At the back of the army, Mo Jingli sat high on his horse and stared at the situation on the battlefield. He didn't need the people beside him to remind him. He naturally saw the group of strong black figures. As expected of the Black Cloud Cavalry, the general beside him couldn't help but sigh. If they had this kind of army, why would they worry about the world being unstable? Even if they were already enemies, they still couldn't hide their admiration when they saw this kind of elite army. Mo Jingli laughed coldly, they finally came out. With a wave of his hand, two groups of fresh troops that hadn't participated in the battle charged into the battlefield. They all say that the Black Cloud Cavalry is good at attacking. Let's see what you can do with so many people. Yonglin City wasn't big to begin with. Because of the addition of these two groups of people, it could be said that it was overcrowded. The war horses couldn't move at all. The Black Cloud Cavalry clearly understood this. They quickly gave up on their war horses and merged into the chaotic army. Using 2,000 people to stop tens of thousands of people was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the city gate was only so small. Even if they wanted tens of thousands of people, they couldn't rush in at the same time. Thus, for a moment, the two armies were still tangled in a stalemate at the city gate. Even if there were a few rebel soldiers who occasionally rushed in, they were quickly wiped out by the defending army inside the city gate. Who is that person? Mo Jingli, who was watching the battle, suddenly pointed at an exceptionally petite black-clothed figure in the chaotic army. He wore the same black cloud patterned clothes as all of the Black Cloud Cavalry, but his movements were completely different from the Black Cloud Cavalry. If the Black Cloud Cavalry's movements were swift and fierce, then his movements were extremely simple and fierce. It was impossible to see any techniques, but with every simple movement, a soldier would fall in front of him. Regardless of whether it was the normal soldiers or the generals, there was no difference under his hands. That is, everyone was speechless. No one knew who that person was. It was because apart from his figure being a bit shorter and his movements being a bit more swift and fierce, he didn't seem any different from the other Black Cloud Cavalry. Mo Jingli's dark eyes gradually narrowed as he stared at the fierce figure amidst the chaotic army. That figure gave him a strange sense of familiarity. After a long time, he finally spat out a name through gritted teeth: Yi Li. The military advisor on the side was stunned. He quickly looked at the person in the chaotic army and said in shock, "The prince said that is Princess Ding?" Mo Jingli ignored his question. The whip in his hand pointed forward. "If you capture that person alive, I will reward you with 1,000 taels of gold." Yes. Even though the Black Cloud Cavalry had stopped the rebel army at the city gate, they were unable to effectively defend the city towers. Many rebel soldiers had already climbed up the city walls and started to fight with the defending army on the city walls. Yi Li could clearly feel the pressure at the foot of the city walls. She swept aside a rebel soldier that had pounced at her, and when she turned around, she just happened to pierce the throat of another rebel soldier that had pounced at her from behind. And San came over. Said in a low voice, "Young master, it's time to retreat." San swung her sword and created a trail of blood as she said, "Did Mo Jingli discover the princess? Why do I feel that the people coming over right now aren't normal soldiers?" The people around them clearly had good martial arts and were harder to deal with than normal soldiers. Yi Li was helpless, but Yonglin City's fall was a foregone conclusion. If the Black Cloud Cavalry sacrificed themselves now, there was no meaning. They had stalled at the city gate for almost 2 hours. Shattered Snowpass must have received the news. Black Cloud Cavalry, retreat from the battlefield. Chapter 219. Yes. Team 1, 2, and 3 bring up the rear. Everyone else retreat. Qin Feng ordered loudly. "You want to run?" Mo Jingli could clearly see the situation on the battlefield from far away. The Black Cloud Cavalry were good at ambushing, good at hiding, and also good at escaping. The terrain around Yonglin was complicated. Once they left the battlefield, it would be impossible to catch them. However, the Black Cloud Cavalry didn't actually charge into the center of the rebel army. They only blocked the city gates and didn't allow them to advance. When they received the order, they immediately retreated to the left, right, and center of the city. There were also divine archers left behind to bring up the rear. No matter how unwilling the rebel army was, they could only watch as they left the battlefield. Mo Jingli gave a cold snort. He turned around and pulled out the bow on his horse. Narking an arrow, he aimed at the petite black figure in the midst of the rebel army. In the midst of the slaughter, Yi Li could clearly sense a dangerous aura. He only felt that when he turned around, he only saw Mo Jingli's malicious eyes and an arrow flying through the air. If it was any other time, Yi Li naturally wouldn't have to worry about not being able to dodge this arrow. However, he was currently being held down by several rebel soldiers and had no way of dodging. San cried out in alarm and immediately pounced over. Yi Li cursed in his heart. He grabbed a rebel soldier's sword and threw it in the direction San was pouncing over. With this turn and throw, he felt a burning pain in his left arm. The arrow behind him was almost within reach. "Young master, Su." A white arrow emitting a beautiful golden light tore through the air. Mo Jingli's arrow collided with an arrow 3 feet in front of Yi Li and fell to the ground. However, that arrow didn't seem to be affected at all. It passed through a rebel soldier's body and entered another person's chest. That person's eyes were filled with disbelief as he stared at the arrow that had entered his chest. It was as if he couldn't understand how an arrow could shoot out from his comrade's back and even pierce through his chest. Yi Li was also stunned by this shocking arrow, but she instantly threw it to the back of her mind. She turned around and kicked a rebel soldier who seemed to have launched a sneak attack. Heavens! And San couldn't help but sigh in relief. Just now, San had pounced over but was blocked by the person that Yi Li had thrown over. She almost thought that the arrow was going to hit Wang Fei. At this moment, his heart trembled, and he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly moved closer to Yi Li. Golden feather arrow? It's Prince. The Black Cloud cavalryman who stayed behind to cover the rear saw the golden arrowhead tail sticking out from the body of the fallen man and could not help but cry out in alarm. In the distance, Mo Jingli's arrow failed and he was furious. Just as he was about to shoot again, the ground suddenly began to tremble faintly, and the sound of hooves sounded like thunder. Mo Jingli sneered, "You've already played this trick before. Do you want to play it again?" "No, Prince." The military advisor beside him had a face as white as paper. He pointed in the direction of the rolling dust and shouted, "It's real this time." The black-armored cavalry came like a black cloud. Sharp whistles and golden sparks shot into the sky. The Black Cloud cavalryman who had retreated from the battlefield saw the golden sparks in the sky and turned to return to the battlefield at the same time. At some unknown time, ink-colored figures appeared on the surrounding hills. The person at the front had a white horse and a silver spear. His white robes were flowing with clouds. A silver mask covered half of his face, but the other half of his face was full of beautiful eyebrows. His warm eyes were now filled with a sharpness that people did not dare to look directly at as they softly passed over Yi Li's body. Yi Li felt her heart tremble, and at the same time, she took a small breath. The white-clothed man pulled on the reins. The white horse seemed to leap into the air as it charged into the chaotic army. No one dared to stop him. "Black Cloud cavalryman, listen to my orders. Those who betray the country, kill without mercy." A low voice mixed with internal energy spread over the entire battlefield. "Yes, Prince." The echoes shook the sky. In an instant, the entire battlefield seemed to have frozen. Everyone forgot that they were still on the battlefield filled with spears and swords. They could only stare blankly at the white-clothed man in the middle of the chaotic army. A name appeared in their hearts, Mo Xiaoyao. How is this possible? Mo Jingli fiercely stared at the scene in front of him. His eyes were filled with disbelief. "Beat the drums for me, kill." Dong, dong, dong. The heavy sound of the war drums sounded, as if it was beating on everyone's hearts. The rebel army's hearts trembled as they charged at the white-clothed man. They were facing the undefeatable war god of Da Chu state. Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow, as if he was disdainful. The silver spear in his hand drew a stunning silver arc. The tip of the spear brought out beautiful flowers of blood. On the hill, countless arrows interweaved into a dazzling net of arrows. The Black Cloud cavalry were renowned for their archery. Facing such a rain of arrows, not to mention an effective counterattack, the rebel army did not even have the courage to raise their bows. There was also the huge army behind them. In almost an instant, the army of more than 100,000 was already showing signs of defeat. When Mo Xiaoyao appeared, Yi Li retreated back into Yonglin City. After clearing out the rebel army that had just entered the city with the Black Cloud cavalry, she stood on the city gate tower and looked down at the scene below. Everyone's gaze couldn't help but gather on the white-clothed man. White-clothed silver spear, moving like a dragon. Wherever he went, the rebel army would retreat. They didn't dare to cross swords with him. Yi Li had heard Shu Qingchen's evaluation before. When Mo Xiaoyao was young, he was as dazzling as fire. After the great change, the young Mo Xiaoyao was as calm as water, but contained a shocking undercurrent. And the current Mo Xiaoyao was like a peerless sword that had gone through thousands of trials and tribulations. The sharpness was restrained and the murderous aura gradually calmed down. However, the magnificence that had gone through countless trials and tribulations still attracted everyone's attention. Ding! Prince Ding! Yunting leaned weakly against the wall. He didn't care about the blood on his face. He looked at the figures moving around the city with a yearning expression. Xia Shu stood beside him. His face was completely relaxed. "It is very clear that it is. So we waited for the reinforcements. We defended Yonglin City." Yunting's voice carried a bit of an illusory feeling. For a moment, it was hard to tell if it was a dream or reality. And San giggled. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. Congratulations, Officer Yoon. You will be promoted later. Yoon Ting ignored him. He blinked his eyes and looked at Yi Li. Unfortunately, Yi Li was staring at the city and didn't have time to pay attention to him. This time, the battle didn't last for too long. In less than an hour, the rebel army began to retreat to the east. Looking at the rebel army that retreated like a tide, Yoon Ting was speechless. What is the meaning of this? Were these rebel army purposely picking on soft persimmons? He didn't see that many people ran away without confronting the Black Cloud cavalry. Then what was the meaning of fighting to the death with them these past few days? And San smiled. Officer Yoon, don't be sad. Don't talk about the reinforcements. Even if our prince stood there alone, those guys wouldn't dare to take a step forward. This is called imposing manner. Others can't learn it. Just Prince Ding standing at the gate of Yonglin City unharmed was enough to make most people scared out of their wits. What was the point of fighting? When can I have this kind of imposing manner? Yoon Ting murmured, You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.